The velvet drapes are drawn, and the room smells faintly of perfume and coal smoke. You sit in a high-backed chair, gloved hands trembling as a folded note burns in your pocket. On the street outside, the world believes you're respectable, upright, pure, untouched by scandal. But in here, under the faint flicker of the gas lamp, a door has opened to something you were told must never be spoken. A desire so dangerous, so intoxicating that discovery could ruin your name forever. And yet, you lean closer. You can't help yourself. You're drawn in. If this quiet descent into the hidden corners of Victorian life holds your attention, stay with me. Now, sink deeper into stillness, let your breath soften, and let the hush of the room take you. We're stepping back into the time of Victorian England, when repression ruled the day and cravings crept out at night. Today, you're free to choose, free to love, free to speak. Back then, even a glance could brand you a sinner, so breathe easy, you've escaped their world. The curtains are heavy, velvet, and lined with dust that never quite shakes free no matter how many times you brush them. You pull them tight, the brass rings sliding along the rail with a soft scrape, shutting out the gaslit street beyond. The world out there must see you as respectable, a figure framed by neat collars, polished shoes, and all the manners the age demands. But in here, in the hush behind the curtains, you allow your breath to quicken. The fire crackles low in the grate, casting shadows that stretch and curl across the walls like they know your secret. You sink into the chair, spine straight at first, as though even alone you must keep up appearances. That is how deep it runs, the need to look proper, even when no one is watching. Victorian England has planted that habit in you so thoroughly it feels like bone. But tonight, something pulls against it. A folded note lies on the small table beside you, its wax seal broken hours ago, its words still burning like coal against your skin. You shouldn't have read it, you shouldn't even have opened it, but you did. Outside, the sound of a carriage wheel rattles past, iron rim biting against cobblestones slick with fog. A horse snorts, and the echo of boots follows a gentleman heading home late, perhaps. You sit frozen, listening, as though every step might turn toward your door. That is the constant fear of living with desire in this age, not the act itself, but the possibility of discovery. Neighbors' eyes, servants' whispers, the casual cruelty of gossip. In a city this dense, privacy is always an illusion. You breathe in, slow, and the air tastes of coal smoke and candle wax. The clock ticks steadily, each second puncturing the silence. You imagine the world beyond your curtains, the lamps glowing on fog-shrouded corners, constables pacing, ladies drawing shawls tighter against the damp, all of them certain that virtue rules the night. They do not know about the letter. They do not know about the heat it stirs in you, a heat you must press down, hide, disguise in every gesture. The Victorians call it purity, they call it restraint. Yet you know, as countless others know, that repression only sharpens the hunger. Every time you suppress a thought, it grows teeth. Every time you look away, it grows wings. And so you live behind curtains, creating little sanctuaries of shadow where you might at least breathe without choking on shame. The fire pops, scattering sparks, and you lean forward, elbows resting on your knees. The letter lies temptingly close, its words promised a meeting, a place where desire is not spoken but acted, where others gather behind their own curtains, away from polite eyes, to step into the hunger that daylight forbids. You picture it, the creak of a hidden door, the flicker of candles, the shared silence of those who understand. But you also picture the danger, a raid, a scandal splashed across the papers, your name reduced to a warning whispered in parlors. So you sit, the curtains drawn, the world held at bay by a few folds of cloth, and in that small space between fear and craving, you realize that this is the essence of Victorian desire, not the act itself, but the endless dance of concealment. Passion does not vanish under rules, it hides, grows, and waits. The curtains may close out the world, but they cannot close out your own body, your own thoughts. You lean back at last, the chair creaking softly beneath you. The velvet holds back the street, but the firelight reveals everything here, the tremble in your hand, the heat on your cheek, the quickening of your breath. You are alone, yet not free. Trapped not by locks, but by the gaze you imagine even in solitude. The curtains protect you, and they imprison you. And as the coals glow lower, you understand why the night feels so heavy. It carries not only the weight of silence, but the burden of every secret never spoken. The drawer resists you at first, its iron key reluctant to turn, as though it knows the weight of what it holds. You twist harder, the lock giving with a muted click that feels louder than thunder in the still of the room. The fire has burned down to embers, and the shadows creep closer with each fading glow. You pull the drawer open slowly, and the faint smell of paper and perfume escapes, faded lavender, old ink, a trace of something human left behind. Inside lies a collection that should not exist. Folded notes, pressed flat and tied in ribbon, their edges fraying where they've been read and reread. A photograph, sepia fading at the corners, the subject half smiling in a way that tells more truth than any proper portrait could. And then, the objects. Small things, almost innocent, until you know what they mean. A handkerchief, embroidered with initials no one must see. A lock of hair, golden and bound with silk thread. The Victorians call these tokens sentimental keepsakes, but you know better. They are relics of longing, proof that something forbidden once passed between hands, between lives. Your fingers hover above them, trembling. Each item is more dangerous than it looks. If a servant were to stumble across this drawer while dusting, or if a visitor grew curious and tugged at the handle, your life could unravel in an instant. These tokens are not just objects, they are evidence. Evidence of desires that society insists should never have stirred at all. In Victorian England, sin is not measured by the act alone, but by the thought, the whisper, the hint. The locked drawer is your confession, bound not in words but in silence. You pick up one of the letters, the paper gone soft from handling. The handwriting is careful, the flourishes extravagant, as though each loop of ink is meant to distract from the danger it carries. The sentences are riddled with code, metaphors about the moon and the tides, the rose and its thorns. Yet the meaning is unmistakable. Between the lines is heat, between the lines is hunger, and between the lines is fear. A single phrase seemingly harmless could mean nothing to an outsider, but to you it burns hotter than fire. You tuck the letter back beneath the others, hands unsteady. The drawer is more than storage. It is a tomb for things you cannot let die. Every object whispers when touched, dragging you back to nights of quick glances, hidden gestures, and the kind of touch that leaves you wide-eyed in the dark, wondering how you will face daylight. You close your eyes, and for a moment you hear laughter, soft and reckless, echoing through memory. You hear the rustle of skirts, the scrape of boots across the floor, the sound of a door slamming just in time to avoid discovery. Then the clock strikes, once, twice, 3 times, pulling you back to the present. You shove the items down, stack them carefully, and close the drawer with deliberate precision. The lock clicks shut, sealing everything inside once more. You rest your palm against the wood, feeling the faint vibration of your own pulse. The drawer is locked, but it is not gone. Its contents breathe beneath the surface like embers, waiting for air. The Victorians prided themselves on order, on everything kept in its place. Drawers were for gloves, for linens, for letters from respectable relatives. But yours is different. Yours holds the truth of what cannot be spoken aloud, and that truth is alive. As you step back, your eyes flick toward the door, imagining a knock, imagining discovery. A drawer, after all, is only as safe as its lock, and locks can break. You return to your chair, but the weight of that hidden trove presses down on the room. The curtains guard you from the street, yet the locked drawer holds the greater threat. It is the heart of your secret, beating in silence, and as the fire sighs into ash, You wonder not if it will be opened again, but when. The lamplight trembles outside, a pale glow spilling through the mist that clings to the narrow street. You step carefully, your boots clicking against damp stone, the air sharp with coal smoke and the faint tang of horse dung. Carriages rattle past, wheels spraying water from the gutters, but you hardly notice. Your eyes are fixed on her, no, not her face, not her gloves, not her perfectly upright posture. What caught you, what rooted you in place, was the faintest flash of pale skin where her dress hem lifted above the boot. An ankle, just an ankle. It lasts no more than a second. A turn as she crosses the street, skirts gathered to avoid the puddle, and there it is, the forbidden glimpse, lit by gaslight, shocking as lightning. In another time, another place, no one would think twice. But in Victorian England, where every gesture is wrapped in propriety, where every glance is a test of restraint, that flash of skin feels like a crime and a confession all at once. You draw a breath, steadying yourself. The gas lamp hums faintly, its halo of light catching the sheen of her boot as it settles back onto the cobblestones. She straightens, her posture flawless once more, the moment gone. Yet your thoughts run wild. You think of what society has made of such glimpses, pamphlets warning of lust's dangers, sermons thundering about purity, doctors writing grim treatises on how unchecked desire destroys the body. And still, here you are, heart quickened, every sense sharpened by nothing more than the curve of an ankle. She does not look at you, does not even pause. Her steps echo down the street, purposeful and measured, as if she has no idea what she has done. Or perhaps she does. Perhaps that careful lift of fabric was not as careless as it appeared. Perhaps it was a flicker of defiance, a spark struck in a world that smothers women in corsets and lace, telling them their very bodies are shameful things. You cannot know. That is part of the torment. You stand beneath the gaslight, the fog curling against your coat, and you feel the weight of the rules pressing down. An ankle is not just an ankle. It is an invitation to imagination, to longing, to scandal. Victorian society has built entire walls of silence around such small details, and by doing so has made them enormous. The less that is shown, the more power the glimpse carries. A wrist exposed when a glove slips, a throat revealed when a collar loosens, a skirt lifted just enough to reveal the edge of a boot. Each sight becomes charged, dangerous, unforgettable. You walk on at last, but the image follows you. The pale skin, almost glowing in the gaslight, lingers in your mind like the after-image of a flame. You imagine hands reaching, forbidden words whispered, the consequences unspooling like a nightmare. Gossip that spreads, reputations shattered, a name reduced to mockery in drawing rooms. All from a second's glimpse, all from an ankle. The street grows quieter as you leave the lamps behind, but your thoughts will not settle. You realize that in this world, where desire is denied the light of day, it thrives in the shadows. Repression turns every glance into a story, every movement into a temptation, and so an ankle in the gaslight becomes not just a fleeting sight, but a symbol of everything that cannot be spoken. The fog thickens, swallowing the street, and you pull your coat tighter. Yet beneath the weight of fabric, your skin burns. The night carries on as if nothing happened, but you know better. You carry the secret inside you, sharp and alive, proof of how desire in Victorian England was never straightforward, never safe. It lived instead in moments like this, quiet, accidental, devastating, and once glimpsed, never forgotten. The room smells of carbolic soap and damp wool, a doctor's office made sterile not by cleanliness but by fear. You sit stiff-backed in the wooden chair, hands folded tight in your lap, eyes fixed on the rows of glass bottles lined along the shelves. Their labels catch the light: laudanum, bromide, tincture of opium, chloroform, words whispered with reverence and dread, cures that blur the line between medicine and control. The doctor clears his throat, quill scratching across his ledger, and you feel the weight of his gaze before he speaks. He doesn't ask you what you want. In Victorian England, patients rarely do. Instead, he tells you what you are. Hysteria, he mutters, almost mechanically, as though it explains everything. A word stretched thin enough to cover sadness, anger, longing, and above all desire. To feel too much, to want too much, is an illness. That is what the age insists. And so the prescription comes not for your health, but for your restraint. He slides the paper toward you, the ink still wet, and you see the name of the medicine, laudanum. A neat little potion of alcohol and opium, as common in respectable parlours as sherry or tea. Mothers feed it to their infants, nurses to their patients, men to their wives when nerves grow too sharp. You know the stories. The way it dulls not only pain but memory, leaving a haze where once there was fire. And perhaps that is the point. Better to blur your thoughts than to let them run into dangerous territory. The doctor speaks again, his tone calm, his words practiced. He tells you this will steady your heart, soften your moods, help you sleep. He does not mention that it will also soften your will, blurring the edges of desire until it can be folded away like an old letter. He does not need to. The prescription itself is a command. Feel less, want less, remember less. You take the slip of paper, its weight absurd for what it holds, and you imagine the bottle that will soon sit by your bedside. A dark glass vial, cork sealed, its contents thick and bitter. Just a spoonful, they say, and the world will feel distant, softened, muted. No more restlessness in the night, no more trembling hands, no more fire behind your ribs that cannot be spoken aloud. And yet you hesitate, because you know, as others know, that the prescription is not just medicine, it is silence in liquid form, each drop a denial, each dose a curtain drawn tighter across your own body. The Victorians call it treatment, but you feel the truth. It is erasure. The doctor clears his throat again, impatient, and you rise, tucking the prescription into your pocket. Outside, the fog clings low to the street, and gas lamps burn with their steady, watchful glow. You walk quickly, the slip of paper crackling against your coat, your pulse louder than your footsteps. The city continues around you, unaware, but you carry the knowledge of what you've been given, a bottle to tame the hunger, to chain the very thing that makes you alive. You picture yourself tipping the spoon to your lips, the bitterness sliding down, the warmth spreading through your chest. You picture the quiet that follows the thoughts dulled, the body subdued, the world pressed into a gentler blur. But you also picture the other side, the shadow of dependence, the long line of women and men bound not by passion but by medicine, their forbidden desires swallowed until they vanish into fog. As you turn the corner and disappear into the night, the prescription rests in your pocket like a stone. You understand now that this is how the Victorian world treats desire, not with freedom, not with acknowledgement, but with a bitter cure poured carefully by the spoonful. The bottle is meant to keep you safe, they say, but you know it is really meant to keep you quiet. The parlour is warm, stifling even, though the coal fire burns low in the grate. Heavy drapes smother the windows, keeping the fog outside at bay, while within, the air hangs thick with perfume and smoke. The room is arranged for respectability, patterned carpet, upright chairs, porcelain figurines lining the mantel. But it is not the furniture that holds your attention tonight. It is the voices, low, careful, edged with something unspoken, whispers moving like shadows between the guests. You sit at the edge of a chair, teacup untouched in your hand. Laughter ripples softly from one corner, too restrained to break the hush, too nervous to be free. In another corner, two women lean close, their gloved hands resting against the same armrest, their heads inclined just enough to keep their words private. The men around them pretend not to notice, or perhaps notice too much. In Victorian England, the parlour is the stage upon which desire must disguise itself as conversation. Your own ears sharpen, straining to catch fragments. They are not confessions exactly, but neither are they harmless. A phrase about a walk in Hyde Park, spoken too softly, stretched with too much longing. A mention of music, of a certain piece performed not for the room but for someone listening too closely. The words are coded, careful, folded into politeness, but you can feel their heat. You can feel the edge of danger where language strains against its leash. The hostess pours more tea, her movements practiced, her smile smooth, but her eyes flick toward the whisperers, and you realize she hears it too. She knows what is happening in her own parlor, knows that beneath the polite chatter runs another current altogether. Desire has found a way in, even here, beneath portraits of ancestors and shelves of respectable books. You shift slightly, setting your cup on the saucer with a soft clink, and the sound feels like a warning bell. For a moment, the whispers pause. Then they resume, quieter, tighter, as though pulling the curtain even closer. The parlor is full of such curtains, fabric ones to block the street, social ones to block the truth. And yet, through them, desire still seeps. The clock ticks steadily, its hands moving toward midnight, and you sense how long these whispers might last if unchecked. Hours of coded language, hours of glances disguised as casual turns of the head, hours of laughter stretched too thin. No one in the room dares to name it outright, for naming is the one thing forbidden. Instead, they circle it endlessly, letting hints hang in the air like smoke from the fire. You realize now why parlors like this matter so much. They are the only spaces where forbidden desire can breathe, even faintly. Behind closed doors, under the guise of social visits, longing finds its stage. The whispers carry what letters cannot safely hold, what glances on the street dare not risk. The parlor becomes a sanctuary, fragile and temporary, but vital. The fire hisses softly, coal settling into ash, and you glance once more at the pair leaning close. Their words are too faint for you to hear, but the intensity is unmistakable. Their voices blend with the crackle of the fire, with the ticking of the clock, with the very air of the room. You do not need to know the exact words. You know enough. As the night stretches on, you understand what Victorian desire truly sounds like. Not the cry of passion, not the roar of scandal, but the whisper in the parlor, low, careful, dangerous. The kind of sound that slips between sentences, never written down, never meant for anyone beyond the walls. And yet it lingers, echoing long after the guests have gone, long after the fire dies, long after the curtains are drawn tight against the night. The newspaper crackles in your hands, its pages broad and awkward, the ink smudging faintly against your fingertips. Outside, the street is still damp from the morning rain, and the gas lamps sputter in the fog, but you are barely aware of it. Your attention lingers on a column halfway down the page, wedged between notices for missing dogs and announcements of estate auctions. The print is small, almost ordinary, yet your pulse quickens as you read it. Companionship desired, discretion assured. Reply to box number 147. To the untrained eye it means nothing. A lonely soul searching for company, a polite arrangement of words. But you know better. In Victorian England, where every craving must be hidden, coded advertisements like this are doorways. Doorways into rooms you are never supposed to enter, lives you are never supposed to live. You trace the words again, your eyes hungry, and feel the weight of what they imply. Companionship is not just companionship. Discretion is the true heart of the matter, the unspoken contract that what happens will remain unseen, unspoken, unremembered by anyone but you. You know others scan these same columns, eyes sharp for code, minds racing with what might be found on the other side of an innocuous reply. A man searching for a woman he cannot name. A woman searching for a woman she dares not acknowledge. A gentleman hunting not for love but for indulgence. All of it hidden in the polite folds of newsprint. The newspaper trembles slightly as you fold it back into your lap. Your mind floods with questions. Who wrote the advertisement? Where will the reply lead? To a shadowed back room of a tavern? A drawing room with curtains drawn tight? A rented lodging forgotten by the city where desire can breathe for a single night? The possibilities flare in your imagination, each one sharper and more dangerous than the last. Around you, the world continues as if nothing has shifted. The newsboy shouts the headlines about politics, about ships docking, about rail timetables. A woman hurries past with a parasol, her skirts damp at the hem. None of them know what lies on this page, what signal has been sent out into the foggy air. That is the true power of the advertisement. It is both public and hidden, visible to everyone and understood by almost no one. You fold the paper quickly, tucking it beneath your coat as though it might burn you if left in plain sight. Already you feel the press of fear. What if someone saw you pause too long at the column? What if a watchful eye noted your interest? In this world, suspicion alone is enough to unravel you, and yet, beneath the fear, desire stirs. The thought of answering, of stepping into the unknown, makes your chest tighten with anticipation. You rise from your seat, the folded newspaper heavy under your arm, and step into the fog-thick street. The advertisement follows you, etched into your memory, alive as a secret heartbeat. In a city that insists desire must remain unspoken, this slip of newsprint becomes a map, a signal fire, a promise. And as you disappear into the mist, you realize the truth. The most forbidden things in Victorian England are often hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone brave or desperate enough to see them. The carriage jolts to a halt, wheels grinding against the cobblestones slick with evening drizzle. You hesitate before stepping down, glancing at the row of houses. To the untrained eye, they are identical red brick, polished brass knockers, lace curtains drawn tight, respectable, silent. But you know better. Behind one of these doors waits a world carved out of velvet and shadow, a refuge where Victorian society pretends not to look. You rap softly 3 times, and the door opens at once. No questions, no greetings, only a nod from a woman with sharp eyes and a dress of dark silk. She leads you down a narrow hallway, the air heavy with perfume and smoke, until the muffled sound of music reaches your ears. A violin, faint and restless, played somewhere in the distance. The room she ushers you into is nothing like the streets outside. Curtains are drawn thick across the windows, the fire burning bright in the grate, and every surface glows with color scarlet velvet draped across chairs, gold tassels trembling with each step, mirrors reflecting the flame's light so that it seems the walls themselves breathe. A glass of brandy waits on a tray, its amber surface trembling with the warmth of the fire. But it is not the brandy nor the velvet that makes your pulse quicken, it is the people. A man reclines in a chair too casually for the age, his cravat loosened, his eyes lingering where they should not. A woman in a gown of silk leans close to another, their laughter soft and private, as though the rest of the room has vanished. No one here follows the rules of the daylight world. Behind these walls, society's grip loosens, and desire steps into the open. You take the glass, sip, and let the fire sting your throat. The hostess drifts from guest to guest, her presence commanding without words, her glance both welcoming and watchful. These houses exist because of her kind women who learn to profit from what society condemns, who turn shame into survival. They are whispered about in parlors, condemned in pulpits, hunted by the law. And yet their doors are always full, their rooms always warm, because repression creates hunger, and hunger always finds a place to feed. The violin fades, replaced by hushed voices and the faint brush of silk against silk. Someone closes a door down the corridor, muffling laughter. You sit back, the velvet soft beneath your hands, and feel the weight lift from your shoulders. Here, for a moment, you are unseen, not judged, not whispered about, not crushed beneath the rigid codes of purity. Here, you are only what you feel. And yet, even in the velvet glow, danger lingers. A raid could come without warning, a name could slip into the wrong ear, a single betrayal could reduce this sanctuary to ruin. Everyone here knows it. That is why the laughter is too quick, the touches too fleeting, the pleasure too sharp. Because at dawn, each guest will step back into respectability, their faces calm, their secrets sealed. The hostess meets your gaze at last, her smile faint but knowing. You nod, finishing your drink, and the firelight flickers across the velvet one last time. Outside, the fog presses against the windows, waiting. Inside, the room breathes with forbidden life. For a few hours, in these velvet rooms, you are free. The nursery is quiet now, the children finally asleep upstairs, their soft breathing muffled by thick curtains and woolen blankets. You sit alone at the small writing desk, the lamp burning low, your shadow stretched long across the wallpaper patterned with faded flowers. The governess's life, they say, is one of duty and morality, a model for the household's young to imitate. Yet no one ever asks how it feels to live always in between, too educated to be a servant, too dependent to be a lady, always watched, never free. The house hums faintly around you. From below, laughter drifts up from the dining room, where the family feasts and talks beneath chandeliers you will never sit beneath. A burst of male laughter, a clink of glasses, a woman's reply tones of a world that is not yours. You are neither guest nor kin. You exist in the margins, teaching lessons in French and music, ensuring that children's hands stay clean and their postures upright. But when the house quiets, when no one is near, the burden presses in. Desire does not vanish simply because society demands it. It lingers in your body, in your dreams, in the faintest brush of a hand when you pass a book to a pupil's father. It lives in the way your heart jumps when footsteps pause outside the schoolroom door, in the heat that rises when eyes linger too long across the parlor. Yet for a governess, desire is not only forbidden, it is ruinous. To be caught even in suspicion is to lose not only your place in this household but your livelihood, your respectability, your fragile claim to safety. And so you bury it. You fold it away like the letters you never write, the embraces you never dare. At night, when the house has gone silent, you open your small trunk at the foot of your narrow bed. Inside are scraps of another life, a book of poems, underlined where the verses speak too plainly of longing, a handkerchief pressed with lavender, its scent fading but still clinging to memory. A ribbon from a gown worn long ago, when you were younger and thought freedom was still possible. You hold them in your hands as though they might breathe for you, as though they might remind you that you are still alive beneath the layers of duty. Outside the window, fog drifts past the street lamps, the city alive in shadows you are forbidden to enter. Others walk there, ladies in silks, men in fine coats, and those who sell what they must to survive. Sometimes you envy them, even the women whispered about as fallen. At least they are not invisible. At least their desires do not rot silently behind locked doors. The lamp flickers, its oil nearly gone, and you close the trunk, pressing its lid shut. Tomorrow you will rise early, braid your hair neatly, correct the children's posture, and recite lessons with a calm voice. No one will know what you carry inside. No one will see the burden you cannot lay down, for the governess must remain upright, silent, respectable, and so your longing remains locked away, like everything else in this house, hidden behind a smile that never quite reaches your eyes. The clock downstairs chimes midnight. You blow out the lamp, and the room falls into darkness. The burden is yours alone, and it waits for you in silence. The pamphlet lies open on the desk. Its page is yellowed, but its warning still sharp. You read the words slowly, your lips moving silently over sentences penned by a Victorian physician who believed he was saving souls. He describes it as a disease, a sin, a poison that eats away at the body and mind. He calls it self-abuse, solitary vice, the hidden destroyer. His ink bleeds with fear, and as you sit in the glow of the lamp, you feel the weight of his words pressing against your chest, colder than the fog outside. In Victorian England, desire is not simply frowned upon, it is pathologized, dressed in the language of medicine. The doctors, priests, and pamphleteers agree, to touch yourself is to invite ruin. They warn of madness, blindness, trembling hands, wasted bodies. Mothers sew stiff cloth restraints into their children's nightclothes. Fathers purchase metal contraptions meant to guard against temptation. Even the most private urges are dragged beneath the gaze of morality, shackled with chains of fear. You imagine the child alone in the dark, shifting restlessly under wool blankets, only to be startled awake by the scrape of iron at the wrists, the pinch of straps drawn tight. You imagine the shame when the doctor visits, his voice calm, clinical, yet filled with judgment as he lectures about the dangers of secret indulgence. How quickly the body, once a quiet companion, becomes an enemy. How quickly the mind is turned against itself. The panic spreads far beyond bedrooms. Sermons thunder from pulpits about purity. Mothers whisper warnings in parlors. Schools hand out tracts describing the silent vice that stalks the innocent. Every fainting spell, every bout of melancholy, every illness of the nerves is traced back to the same hidden culprit. And so, the body becomes a battlefield, the simplest pleasures transformed into symptoms, the most private moments painted as sin. You close the pamphlet, the paper crackling in your hands, and feel the silence of the room pressing closer. A fire burns in the grate, its light flickering across the walls, but it does not warm you. Instead, you think of how many lives have been twisted by this fear, how many grew up afraid not only of discovery but of themselves. You think of the countless nights where longing was swallowed by terror, where the urge to reach out for comfort turned into a desperate prayer for forgiveness. And yet, despite the panic, the desire never vanished. It hid in silence, waiting, stubborn as breath. The more the Victorians sought to restrain it, the more it carved secret channels through their world. In the hush of locked bedrooms, behind heavy curtains, in the corners of school dormitories and quiet nurseries, it survived. The pamphlets could not burn it out. The straps could not bind it forever. The lamp hisses softly, its flame trembling lower, and you slide the pamphlet back into the drawer. The warnings remain, but so does the truth you cannot deny. Repression only breeds hunger. In the gas-lit night, with the city muffled outside your window, you understand what the Victorians feared most. Not sickness, not sin, but the unstoppable persistence of desire itself. The oak doors swing shut behind you, sealing off the city's damp fog and replacing it with warmth, smoke, and the low hum of male voices. The club is dim but opulent, mahogany walls lined with hunting prints, plush armchairs upholstered in leather, gas lamps burning low in glass globes. Tobacco smoke hangs in a slow-moving haze, curling above the billiard table where two men lean lazily against their cues. In every corner, brandy glows amber in cut crystal glasses, and the sound of shuffling cards blends with muffled laughter. To outsiders, the Gentlemen's Club is a fortress of respectability. Here, members of Parliament rub shoulders with barristers, doctors with bankers, all cloaked in the certainty of their social rank. The newspapers describe such places as the backbone of English civility, sanctuaries where business is conducted, politics debated, and men find respite from the demands of home. But as you sink into a leather chair and watch the glances flicker across the room, you sense something else beneath the surface. The conversations carry layers. On one side of the room, a pair of men laugh too quickly at a private joke, their shoulders pressed closer than needed, their eyes avoiding the others. On another, wagers are whispered not about horses or politics, but about rendezvous, carefully disguised beneath talk of the theatre. The club offers more than brandy and cigars, it offers shelter for whispers that would never survive in daylight. You lift your glass, the brandy warm on your tongue, and notice the coded language woven into casual sentences. A mention of a particular actress at Drury Lane, praised not for her performance but for her hospitality. A reference to a certain bookseller on Holywell Street, his back room filled with volumes no respectable man would admit to owning. Each word is a test, a signal, a question asked in plain sight, yet only answered by those who understand. The fire crackles in the grate, and you realize why the club thrives in this way. Behind its doors, men who outwardly preach restraint allow themselves to bend. Here, they can indulge without consequence, gambling debts forgiven by friends, lusts confessed in half-sentences, forbidden plans hatched under the shield of secrecy. The staff know to look away, the servants move quietly, and reputations remain intact as long as nothing leaves these walls. And yet, the danger is always present. One overheard remark, one servant tempted to gossip, one police inspector prying too closely, and the entire house of cards could collapse. Every man in the room knows it, and that is why the laughter is too loud, the jokes too sharp, the brandy poured too quickly. The club is not just comfort, it is risk wrapped in velvet. You lean back in your chair, the smoke stinging your eyes, and watch as a hand lingers too long on another's shoulder. The moment is brief, hidden beneath the shuffle of cards and the swirl of brandy. But it is enough. The club hums with more than conversation. It hums with the forbidden, alive in every glance, every whisper, every deal struck behind the safety of its locked doors. Outside, the fog presses against the windows, blind and silent. Inside, the gentleman's club glows with secrets too heavy for daylight, sealed in smoke and shadows that only deepen as the night drags on. The maid laces you in with steady, practiced hands, the cords pulling tighter with every tug. You grip the edge of the bedpost, knuckles whitening, breath shortening as the whalebone frame closes around your body. The corset bites into your waist, pressing your ribs, flattening your stomach, shaping you into the hourglass silhouette that Victorian fashion demands. Outside, the city fog drifts across the cobblestones, but in here, the air is already thin. You feel the tension between what the corset is meant to be and what it truly is. To society, it is respectability made visible, a body disciplined, restrained, contained. To the magazines and etiquette guides, it is the mark of a virtuous woman, one who holds herself upright, whose posture speaks of moral character as much as physical form. But as the laces tighten further, you sense another truth. The corset is a cage that both suppresses and heightens desire. Your breath comes shallow now, chest rising and falling in quick rhythm. Every movement is restricted, every gesture shaped by the whalebone's embrace. And yet the restriction is not only pain, it is sensation. The pressure sharpens your awareness of your own body. You feel your pulse in places you usually ignore. You feel warmth gathering where the corset presses hardest. In the silence of the bedroom, with the maid tugging one lace after another, the act itself begins to feel illicit, intimate, as though she is not dressing you but awakening something. For the Victorians, the corset is a paradox. It is both a symbol of purity and an unspoken invitation. Men write poetry about the curve of a waist, artists sketch lines of boned fabric clinging to the female form, and women themselves whisper about the strange thrill of being bound so tightly. Doctors warn of fainting spells, of organs displaced, of health endangered. Still, women return to the laces, the whalebone, the tightening. Because the corset is not only armor against judgment, it is also a stage upon which forbidden desires are rehearsed in silence. You glance in the mirror as the maid ties the final knot. Your waist is smaller now, impossibly narrow. The gown that waits on the hanger will cling perfectly. To the world you will appear as they wish you to, refined, restrained, a model of discipline. But beneath the satin and lace, you will carry the hidden fire of the corset's grip, the way it makes every breath a reminder, every step a performance, every sigh tinged with more than exertion. When the maid leaves, you remain by the mirror, fingertips brushing the rigid lines that hold you in place. You imagine undoing the laces, letting them spill loose, the rush of air filling your lungs again, your body reclaiming its shape, but you do not untie them. You are bound for the evening, bound for the role expected of you, bound by the corset's embrace. The door knocks faintly from the hallway, the world calling you back into its gaze. You straighten, wincing slightly, and step toward the gown that will cover everything. The corset holds you firm, every movement a reminder of how little is yours and how much is theirs. Yet beneath the satin surface, beneath the rigid whalebone, your desire still breathes, constricted, sharpened, and very much alive. The gate clanks shut behind you. iron bars rattling as though to remind you of their weight. You step into the courtyard, narrow and grey, its stone walls slick with damp. The Magdalene Asylum is meant to be a place of redemption, but as the door locks behind you, it feels closer to a prison. The girls here are called fallen women, those who strayed from virtue, who were cast out by families, who bore children out of wedlock, or who sold their bodies on foggy streets to survive. But inside these walls their names vanish. They are stripped down to labels: sinner, penitent, reclaimed. You walk through the corridor, the air heavy with lye soap and silence. The women sit in rows at long wooden tables, heads bent over endless piles of laundry. Steam rises from the great copper vats, wet linen slapped against boards, arms red with cold water. This is their labor, day after day washing, scrubbing, pressing, meant to cleanse not only fabric but souls. The matrons say it redeems them, keeps their hands busy so their minds might forget temptation. Yet the rhythm of the work is more punishment than salvation. The scrape of washboards echoes like chains. You glance at their faces, though they rarely lift their eyes. Young, old, weary, defiant, each one marked not by crime but by circumstance. A girl of 16, hair cropped short, lashes clumped with tears. A mother whose body still carries the memory of childbirth, separated from her infant. A woman with hard, set features, who has been here so long she barely remembers another life. They are called Magdalenes, named after the saint who repented, yet their repentance is forced, demanded, and endless. The chapel bell tolls, and the women rise as one, moving silently into the small hall where prayers are recited until voices turn hoarse. Here, desire is named as sickness, love as sin, longing as corruption. The words of the priest thunder about purity, about the dangers of passion, about obedience to God. The women kneel, their skirts brushing stone, their eyes lowered. But in the silence between prayers, you sense something else: resentment, exhaustion, the faint spark of rebellion pressed beneath layers of ritual. At night, the dormitory fills with the sound of muffled sobs. The women lie side by side on narrow cots, the air smelling of damp wool and sweat, the only light a single candle guttering at the far end of the room. The matrons believe this order will cleanse them, that scrubbing sheets and reciting psalms will erase the lives they once lived, but behind closed eyelids, desire does not vanish. It twists itself into dreams of lovers left behind, of children taken, of warmth denied. You step back into the courtyard, the iron gate looming above. Outside, society congratulates itself for its mercy. Newspapers praise the asylums as moral triumphs, sanctuaries for the lost. Respectable families donate money, imagining they are rescuing the fallen. But here within, redemption is indistinguishable from punishment: laundry, silence, prayer. The endless cycle of erasing women until they forget themselves. The bell tolls again, and the courtyard empties. You remain a moment longer, the fog pressing in from the city beyond. Behind the barred windows, shadows move, whispering lives reduced to silence. And as the iron gate clanks shut once more, you understand what Victorian England feared most: not sin, not desire, but women who dared to live outside its rules. The fog curls low across the cobblestones, swallowing the outlines of gas lamps until they blur into pale halos. The city at midnight is a different creature than the one that parades by day. Respectable women have long since retreated behind lace curtains and locked doors, and only those with nowhere else to go still wander the streets. You step carefully, boots slick against damp stone, the sound of your footfall joining the chorus of carriage wheels, drunken laughter, and the occasional cry that echoes too sharply before being swallowed by silence. At the corner, beneath the weak glow of a lamp, a figure waits. Her gown is patched and thin, hem stained by mud, but her face is painted with careful touches meant to disguise the hunger beneath. She leans against the post, eyes scanning the street with a practiced calm. A gentleman approaches, his steps uncertain, his coat collar turned high against the cold. They do not speak loudly, only a murmur, a nod, a hand brushing briefly against hers. Then, just as quickly, they disappear together into the mist. This is the city's other economy, one that Parliament debates but never abolishes, one the newspapers condemn but secretly rely upon. The streets are full of these transactions, hushed agreements made in the shadows of warehouses, under the eaves of taverns, down alleyways where no constable lingers too long. Brothels flourish behind painted doors, but the street remains the first step, for many the cheapest, the riskiest, the most visible stage of desire. You walk on, your breath clouding in the night air, and notice others. A woman wrapped in a threadbare shawl whistles softly to catch a man's attention. Another approaches boldly, laughter sharp and brittle as glass, offering comfort for a coin. They are judged as immoral, condemned as fallen. But you see their reality more clearly, survival balanced on the edge of every encounter. For many, it is the only way to eat, the only way to pay rent, the only way to keep warm in a city that offers no mercy. The constables patrol at a distance, boots striking hard against stone, truncheons hanging from belts. Their presence is selective, their gaze turned blind for the right faces and merciless for others. Some men fear exposure more than punishment, slipping coins into eager hands to ensure silence. Others relish the cruelty, dragging women by the arm toward the station while the fog watches quietly. Justice is not consistent. It is a game of who can afford discretion and who cannot. A church bell tolls somewhere far off, and the fog grows thicker. The streets empty slightly, though never completely. You hear the echo of laughter, the hollow bang of a door closing, the rustle of skirts disappearing into an alley. Every shadow carries a secret, every step another bargain struck between need and desire. You pause beneath a gas lamp, watching the halo flicker and dim, and you feel the weight of it all, the lives moving like phantoms through the midnight streets, condemned for sins that society itself created. In the end, the city consumes them both, the men who pay and the women who are paid. And as the fog closes tighter, you realize the truth that lingers here at midnight. Respectability sleeps soundly in its fine houses, while desire walks the streets, wearing thin shoes and painted lips, surviving in silence. The house is quiet, the lamps extinguished one by one, until only the faint glow of embers remains in the hearth downstairs. You climb the staircase slowly, the carpet muffling each step, and enter the chamber set aside for the most intimate of duties. The curtains are drawn, the bed neatly turned down by careful servants, the linens crisp and white as if purity itself has been folded into their corners. Yet beneath this veil of respectability, the room feels heavy, expectant. The marriage bed is not simply a place of rest. In Victorian England, it is a stage for duty. Husbands are told it is their right. Wives are told it is their obligation. Sermons, medical texts, and whispered advice all point to the same truth. Intimacy is less about desire than it is about order, inheritance, and the production of heirs. And so you sit on the edge of the mattress, the silence pressing in, aware of the gulf between what is felt and what is expected. The door closes softly, and he enters. His boots are set aside, his waistcoat hung neatly over the chair, every movement careful and rehearsed. He does not ask if you are ready. Readiness is assumed. The household below believes in your harmony, in your uprightness, in your moral character made visible through this union. But behind these walls, the truth is less certain. You lie back against the pillow, the corset finally removed, yet leaving faint red marks etched along your skin, reminders of the day's discipline. His hand rests against your arm, firm but distant, more gesture than affection. The bed itself creaks faintly as he settles beside you. There is no fire of passion here, no unguarded laughter or whispered confessions. Instead, there is silence punctuated by duty. Your body stiffens, not from rejection but from the strange distance of it all, this act demanded by marriage, yet stripped of tenderness. You stare upward at the canopy, watching the candlelight flicker against its embroidered edges, and try to imagine what it might be like to surrender not out of duty but out of desire. The Victorians write endlessly about purity, about chastity, about the dangers of indulgence. For women, to feel too much is to be suspect. For men, to want too often is to risk ridicule or disease. And so the marriage bed becomes not a sanctuary but a ritual, performed to fulfill expectation rather than to satisfy longing. Doctors warn wives not to resist their husbands, yet also instruct them not to enjoy themselves too freely. The contradiction's not tighter than the corset laces that bound you hours before. When it is over, the room grows quiet again. He rolls away, already half asleep, his breathing steady and untroubled. You remain awake, eyes fixed on the canopy, the silence louder than the act itself. You feel no shame, no sin, only a hollow weight, the awareness that something essential is missing. Outside, the city fog curls around the rooftops, indifferent to the rituals performed in countless rooms like this one. You close your eyes at last, not from satisfaction but from exhaustion. The marriage bed creaks as you shift slightly. The linens cool against your skin. Tomorrow the house will speak of you as a devoted wife, as a woman fulfilling her place. But you know the truth, whispered only within yourself, that duty is not the same as love, and that the heart still waits, silent and restless, behind the curtains of this room. The doctor's office is quiet, lit only by the weak glow of a single lamp on the desk. Shelves line the walls, crowded with instruments gleaming in the half-light. Scalpels, forceps, glass jars filled with powders and tinctures. But it is the device on the small table before you that holds your attention. At first glance, it looks harmless, a polished wooden handle, a set of fittings, a mechanism that hums faintly when the doctor tests it. He calls it a treatment, he calls it relief. You know it by another name, the cure for hysteria. The Victorians speak often of hysteria, a diagnosis so broad it covers nearly every complaint a woman might voice: fatigue, irritability, melancholy, even desire. They say the female body is prone to disorder, that the womb itself can wander and cause madness. And so doctors devise cures, mechanical answers to questions they never truly ask. This curious device, he explains, will ease your tension, calm your nerves, restore your balance. It is spoken with the same tone as prescribing laudanum or setting a broken bone, clinical, detached, as though the body is nothing more than a clock in need of winding. You sit stiffly, gloved hands folded in your lap, while the doctor describes its use. His words are precise, his manner rehearsed, as though he has given the speech countless times. He does not look at you as he speaks. He looks at the machine, turning it in his hands, adjusting its fittings. It hums again, faint and unsettling, vibrating with a life of its own. He sets it down gently, as though it is a sacred object, and assures you that this treatment is not indulgence but necessity. The air feels heavier with every word. You sense the tension between what he says and what you know. The cure he describes is not a cure at all, but an acknowledgement of something Victorian society refuses to name outright: desire. The device exists because women are not permitted to seek pleasure, yet their bodies cannot simply be silenced, and so medicine disguises indulgence as therapy, allowing what is forbidden under the cover of science. You picture the countless women who have sat where you sit now, skirts gathered neatly, eyes lowered, their hearts racing with confusion. Were they ashamed? Were they relieved? Did they accept the doctor's explanation? Or did they sense, as you do, the irony of it all, that a society so strict in its morals had found a way to let desire slip in through the back door of medicine? The hum of the device fills the silence of the room, and you feel your breath quicken. The doctor clears his throat, instructs you calmly, as though this is no different from applying a poultice or taking a tonic. And yet, even as he insists on its clinical nature, the truth presses close. This is not medicine. This is repression twisted into ritual, an attempt to tame what cannot be banished. You rise at last, smoothing your skirts, your body unsettled in ways you cannot speak aloud. The doctor nods, satisfied, already recording your visit in his ledger. Outside, the fog swallows the street, the lamps burning pale against the night. You walk quickly, the echo of the device's hum still clinging to your ears. In the silence, one thought repeats itself. In a world that denies desire, even a machine can become its keeper. The fabric is heavy in your hands, black crepe that rustles faintly as you lift it to your face. The mourning veil is longer than you imagined, cascading past your shoulders, brushing the bodice of your gown. When you lower it into place, the world dims, the light of the gas lamp reduced to a faint glow, the edges of the room blurred into shadow. It is supposed to be a symbol of grief, of piety, of dignity. But beneath its weight, you feel something else entirely, an unexpected freedom. Victorian society demands mourning with a strictness bordering on obsession. A widow is to wear black for 2 years, first in heavy crepe, later in softer silks. No jewelry except jet or onyx. No colors brighter than grey, no laughter too loud or steps too quick. Every outward gesture must mirror restraint. To deviate is to invite scandal, to prove yourself unfeeling, indecent, even dangerous. And yet, as you breathe beneath the veil, you recognize the strange space it creates. Behind the black gauze, your eyes are hidden. Behind the uniform of grief, your movements are less visible. The veil is a mask, and masks have always carried power. A woman in mourning is untouchable in one sense, granted a solemn respect no other condition allows. Men avert their eyes, voices soften, footsteps slow. But beneath that solemnity lurks another truth. The veil cloaks you in anonymity. It allows you to move unseen, to glance where you should not, to linger without being noticed. It creates a pocket of privacy in a world that polices your every breath. You recall the stories whispered at gatherings, stories never printed in newspapers but carried on hushed lips, of widows who, shielded by mourning attire, slipped into theaters or meeting houses, their faces obscured, of women who met lovers behind the veil, their identities hidden beneath the very symbol of virtue, of men who confessed how the sight of a face glimpsed through crepe was more alluring than any bare skin. Mourning had become fetish as much as ritual. Desire entwined with grief. You stand before the mirror, the black veil muting your reflection. Your hands, folded neatly in gloves, look almost spectral. The gown clings close, its lines stark without the ornament of lace or ribbon. You are supposed to embody loss, but your body reminds you of life. The silence of the room presses in, broken only by the tick of the clock and the muffled sound of carriage wheels outside. Beneath the veil, your breath warms the fabric, and you feel a tremor in your chest that has nothing to do with sorrow. To mourn is to live within rules, but behind the veil you feel the stirrings of defiance. Desire does not vanish with death, it shifts, finding cover in ritual, finding strength in disguise. The veil, meant to silence you, instead becomes a shield. It hides your eyes but sharpens your vision. It cloaks you in grief, yet it makes you dangerous, untouchable, unseen. You lift the veil at last, folding it carefully back over your head. The room brightens again, the gas lamp flaring in the glass. To the world outside, you are a widow, draped in sorrow, bound by duty. But here, in the quiet, you know another truth. The veil does not only mourn the dead, it shelters the living, and within its darkness, forbidden desires continue to breathe. The leather binding is cracked, its spine weakened from being handled too often, though never openly. You keep it wrapped in brown paper, hidden between volumes of sermons and respectable histories on the bookshelf. Tonight, when the lamps burn low and the servants sleep, you slide it out carefully, heart quickening, as though you are stealing something more precious than gold. The paper rustles faintly, the sound louder than it should be in the silence of the room. The book is not meant to exist in your hands. It is one of those whispered-about volumes, sold discreetly from Holywell Street or passed hand to hand beneath the counters of bookshops. Its pages contain words and images no respectable publisher dares print. Officially, the law calls it obscene, indecent, a corrupter of morals. But here, in the dim light of the lamp, it feels like a secret key to another world. You open it slowly, the pages smelling faintly of ink and dust, and the words leap out at you, language more direct, more dangerous than anything spoken aloud in your drawing room. Descriptions of bodies not draped in muslin or lace, but alive, breathing, hungry. The sentences do not whisper, they burn. Every word strips away the layers of restraint you wear by day, reminding you of what society denies. You read quickly at first, then slower, letting each line seep into you like heat. Illustrations fill some pages crude, sometimes awkward, yet startling in their honesty. Faces flushed with desire, limbs entangled, poses that leave nothing hidden. You trace the lines with your eyes, your breath quickening, every glance a rebellion, for in this book you are not a wife, not a governess, not a penitent sinner. You are only a body that feels, a soul that longs. The forbidden book does not shame you, it acknowledges you. You pause, listening. Outside, the fog presses thick against the window, muffling the sound of carriage wheels. The house is silent, the clock ticking softly in the corner. But you know the danger of being caught. A visitor arriving unexpectedly, a maid slipping in without knocking, even the whisper of gossip if a neighbor spotted the parcel that carried the book to your door. The consequences would be swift: disgrace, ruin, perhaps even the courts. For obscenity is not just a word in this age, it is a weapon. And yet, you cannot put it down. The pages grip you, pull you further in, until the world beyond the lamp's glow fades. Each passage feels like a confession you did not know you longed to make. Each drawing feels like a mirror to a truth you have been taught to deny. At last you close it, hands trembling, and slide it back into its brown paper wrapping. You tuck it once more between the respectable volumes, the sermons, and the histories standing like guards on either side. To anyone else, the shelf is ordinary. To you, it holds a secret fire. You extinguish the lamp, the room falling into darkness, and sit in the quiet a moment longer. The book may be hidden, but its words remain alive in you. In a world that pretends desire must not exist, the forbidden book proves otherwise. It reminds you that even in the strictest age, longing finds a way to write itself into permanence. The carriage jolts forward, wheels clattering against the iron rails, the hiss of steam punctuating the night. You sit pressed against the worn leather of your seat, the scent of coal smoke drifting in through a crack in the window. Across from you, a stranger settles into place, his coat collar damp with fog, his gloves removed one finger at a time. The train sways, lamps flickering overhead, shadows quivering across the narrow space. It is nothing unusual, a late journey shared by passengers too tired to speak. And yet, the air between you tightens with each passing mile. The stranger does not look at you directly, not at first. His eyes remain fixed on the passing blur of darkness beyond the glass, but his knee brushes yours as the carriage lurches. The contact is brief, accidental, yet it sparks like a match struck in the dark. You shift slightly, unsure whether to retreat or remain, your pulse quickening in the silence. He does not move away. Victorian society praises the train as a marvel of progress, an invention that brings order and speed to a restless world. But in these cramped compartments, where strangers are pressed shoulder to shoulder, it also creates a dangerous intimacy. For here, you are removed from the eyes of neighbors, the whispers of parlors, the watchful gaze of family. The train is neither home nor street, it is a liminal space, unclaimed, ungoverned, humming with possibility. The stranger's hand rests on the seat between you, gloved once more, fingers curved loosely. Your eyes drift toward it, then away, then back again, as though drawn by gravity. The rhythm of the train fills the silence, clatter, hiss, sway its movements, echoing your own rising restlessness. He shifts again, the fabric of his sleeve brushing against yours, and though no words are spoken, the gesture feels deliberate. You glance toward the door, half expecting a conductor to appear, half hoping one will not. The corridor beyond is empty, the other compartments hushed. The lamps flicker once more, and in that trembling light, the stranger turns his gaze to you at last. It is not bold, not crude, but steady, an unspoken question lingering in the stillness. You feel your throat tighten, your breath shallow beneath your bodice. To meet his gaze is to admit something you cannot say aloud, and yet you do. The train rattles on, carrying you through fog and countryside, carrying you deeper into temptation. No word is exchanged, no promise made, and yet the air hums with everything unsaid. You imagine the gossip if discovered, the scandal of a chance encounter, mistaken for something more. In this age, even a brush of fabric, even a lingering look, is enough to stain a name. That is the danger, that is also the thrill. At last the train slows, brakes screeching, lamps swinging with the jolt. The stranger rises, adjusts his collar, and steps past you without a word. His coat disappears into the crowd outside, swallowed by fog. You remain seated, heart pounding, the warmth of his nearness still clinging to your skin. The train pulls away once more, carrying you onward, the moment already gone yet seared into memory. In Victorian England, desire survives not in declarations, but in these fleeting encounters, in a glance, a touch, a silence stretched thin as steam in the night. The studio smells of oil paint and turpentine, heavy in the air, mingling with the dust of old canvases stacked against the walls. The windows are tall but half-shuttered, letting in only slanted strips of grey light that slice across the room. In those beams, motes of dust drift like tiny ghosts, settling on unfinished portraits, on sketches pinned carelessly to the boards. You step inside quietly, boots clicking against wooden planks, and the door shuts with a muted thud behind you. Here, in this hidden place, the rules of daylight seem to dissolve. The artist greets you with a nod, his shirt sleeves rolled back, his hands already stained with smears of ochre and sienna. He gestures toward a chair draped with fabric velvet faded from use, cushions indented by countless sitters. To the outside world, it is only art, portraiture, practice, the pursuit of beauty on canvas. But inside this room, truth breathes differently. The artist's gaze lingers longer than it should. His sketches tell stories no respectable gallery would ever dare hang. You remove your gloves slowly, setting them on the table where brushes lie drying. The silence grows heavy, punctuated only by the scratch of charcoal against paper as he begins. At first, the strokes are simple, the outline of a face, the slope of a shoulder. But soon, the lines deepen, his hand quickening, capturing more than just likeness. He draws hunger into the curve of lips, longing into the tilt of the chin. You shift slightly, aware of how intently he watches, how each movement becomes more than gesture, it becomes confession. The Victorians praise art when it flatters virtue. They adore portraits of noble wives, pious daughters, gallant men. But behind closed doors another kind of art flourishes, one that strips away the corsets and collars, one that dares to render the body not as symbol, but as flesh. Sketches pinned to the wall show bare shoulders, curved backs, faces caught in expressions of something closer to ecstasy than prayer. They are hidden when visitors come, rolled into tubes, tucked beneath rugs. Yet here, in the solitude of the studio, they remain alive. The brushstrokes grow bolder as the session continues. Paint glistens wet against canvas, colors blending into shadows that mimic the softness of skin. You can almost feel the weight of his gaze as keenly as touch, the air charged with unspoken understanding. This is not a commission to be displayed in a drawing room. This is intimacy disguised as artistry. To sit here, to allow yourself to be seen in such detail, is itself a dangerous indulgence. Outside, carriages rattle past, the city grinding forward in its clamor of respectability. But in this quiet studio, desire holds the brush. Every stroke defies restraint, every line denies repression. You realize that what is captured here is not merely image, but truth. The truth that beneath every gown and collar lies a body still alive, still hungry, still unwilling to be erased by morality. The light fades as the session ends, shadows creeping long across the floor. The artist sets down his brush, and you rise, gloves in hand, heart beating faster than you expected. The canvas remains behind, paint glistening, a silent record of everything the world insists should never be seen. As you step back into the fog of the evening, you understand why the studio feels dangerous, not because of what was painted, but because of what was allowed to exist, if only for a moment, without shame. The nursery wallpaper peels faintly at the corners, soft patterns of faded roses dissolving into yellowed plaster. In daylight, the room seems harmless, even sweet shelves lined with porcelain dolls, little shoes placed neatly beneath a stool, ribbons pressed between pages of hymnals. But as the gaslight flickers in the corridor, you feel the chill behind such careful staging. In Victorian England, innocence is not just cherished, it is hunted, displayed, consumed. You sit in the parlor later that evening, surrounded by portraits of daughters painted in white muslin, their hair brushed into careful curls. They smile with wide eyes, holding flowers, embodying purity so carefully staged it barely seems human. The Victorians idolize such images. They place them in gilt frames, print them in illustrated magazines, praise them from pulpits as examples of virtue. And yet, the more they worship innocence, the more they twist it into something fragile, dangerous, and desired. Doctors write endless tracts about chastity, insisting that purity safeguards the future of the nation. Moralists lecture that a woman's worth begins and ends with untouched virtue. Even clothing becomes part of the theatre. Pale dresses, high collars, gloves that shield hands from casual touch. A girl must remain unblemished, unsullied, perfect. Yet in the secrecy of parlors, whispers betray a darker fascination. The same society that praises purity cannot resist the thrill of imagining its loss. You hear it in the way men talk at the club, lowering their voices while smoke curls above their glasses of brandy. Their jokes circle around the unspoken, their eyes lingering too long when a young girl enters a room. Newspapers thunder about protecting innocence, even as back rooms of shops sell novels and prints that exploit it. The contradiction is sharp. Purity is sanctified, but it is also fetishized. To desire innocence is to desire the very thing society demands must never be touched. The cost falls always on the girls themselves. If innocence is preserved, they are praised. If it is questioned, they are ruined. There is no middle ground. One letter discovered, one witness who claims too much, one step beyond the rules, and a reputation shatters beyond repair. Families disown daughters, courts humiliate them, charities lock them behind asylum walls. Innocence, once lost, can never be regained. You picture the young governess walking the children through Hyde Park, her charges skipping ahead while her eyes drift toward the crowd. She knows she is being watched, judged not only by her posture and her manners, but by the assumption of purity she must uphold. She cannot laugh too loudly, cannot look too long, cannot walk too briskly, for even joy might be mistaken for impropriety. She carries her innocence like a fragile glass vessel, one slip away from shattering. The fire in the parlor burns low, the portraits staring down from their frames. You study the painted smiles, the empty eyes, and you feel the unease settle deeper. Innocence, in this world, is not simply a state of being, it is a commodity, displayed in parlors, sold in photographs, whispered about in back rooms. It is an obsession that imprisons as much as it protects. And in the hush of the evening, as the gaslight gutters, you realize the cruelest truth of all. Victorian society did not revere innocence because it valued it. It revered innocence because it feared its inevitable loss, and because it secretly longed to watch that loss unfold. The operating room smells sharply of carbolic acid, the tang of disinfectant clinging to your throat. Gaslight burns high above, its yellow glow throwing harsh shadows across the tiled walls. The surgeon stands ready in his white apron, sleeves rolled back, his instruments gleaming in neat rows upon a tray. Scalpels, clamps, polished steel tools that promise healing, but also speak of control. You sit stiff in the waiting chair, every nerve trembling, because in Victorian England, medicine is often less about cure and more about obedience. The diagnosis has already been given, though it was never yours to question. Excessive nerves, wandering womb, unwomanly excitability. Words chosen by men who believe the body is a machine gone astray, and they hold the tools to correct it. The surgeon explains that a procedure will help, that the scalpel will restore balance, banish improper thoughts, calm the restless fire within. He speaks with authority, his tone crisp, his confidence unshaken. Yet beneath his words, you hear what is never said aloud. Desire is not to be treated, it is to be cut away. You imagine the countless women who came before you, seated in this same cold room, skirts rustling nervously as they awaited the surgeon's hand. Some were subjected to clitoridectomies, performed with the solemn claim of saving them from hysteria, madness, ruin. Others endured cauterization injections, procedures framed as cures but designed to erase their most private pleasures. The pain was called medicine, the silence after was called health. The surgeon lifts the scalpel now, testing its edge against the light. The glint of steel catches your eye, and a chill races down your spine. The air is thick, pressing against your chest, making it hard to breathe. You feel not only fear of the blade, but anger that your body is seen as a problem, that your longing has been translated into illness, that the solution is to carve away the very part of you that still feels alive. In the quiet between his words, you hear the faint rattle of carts outside, the shuffle of nurses' shoes, the distant toll of a bell from the street beyond. Life goes on, indifferent, while here you are reduced to specimen, case, example. You wonder if the surgeon ever thinks beyond the procedure, if he ever considers the women who leave his table not healed but hollowed. Perhaps he does not. Perhaps the scalpel is not a cure but a weapon against everything society refuses to understand. You rise slowly, the chair scraping against the tile. His brow furrows as though surprised, but you do not answer. The instruments gleam silently, waiting. The room holds its breath. Outside, the fog presses against the window panes, blurring the gaslight into pale halos. You step toward that faint glow, toward air untainted by disinfectant and steel, carrying with you the knowledge of what they would take from you in the name of medicine. The surgeon's scalpel remains behind, its blade clean, its edge sharp, its silence louder than any warning. In Victorian England, desire was not only forbidden, it was dissected, cut, cauterized. And yet, as you walk out into the night, you know what cannot be carved away. The persistence of longing, alive beneath the skin, sharper than steel, untouchable even by the coldest blade. The gate is small, half hidden beneath ivy, its iron latch rusted but still firm beneath your hand. You glance once over your shoulder, making sure no one has followed, and push it open with a careful shove. It creaks faintly, loud as a confession in the night, and then you slip inside. The garden beyond is cloaked in shadow, the moonlight breaking only in fragments through overhanging branches. Paths wind between hedges, grown tall enough to guard their secrets. Here, at last, the city loosens its grip. The gravel crunches beneath your boots as you walk deeper, your breath steadying in the cool air. The roses, though past their prime, still cling to life, their scent mixing with the dampness of earth. The air carries a hush that feels protective, as though the garden itself understands what is asked of it. This is not a place for daylight visits or polite conversation. This is a sanctuary carved out of secrecy, a space where forbidden meetings can unfold beyond the reach of prying eyes. You remember the coded letter that led you here, words disguised in polite phrases, the location hidden between lines about weather and books. To anyone else, it would seem mundane, but to you, it was a map. And now, within the hush of hedges, you wait. Each moment stretches long, the night air pressing close, until the sound of footsteps approaches along the path. A figure emerges slowly from the shadows, coat dark, hat brim low. For an instant, fear rises, fear of discovery, of scandal, of ruin. But then a familiar glance, a faint smile, and the fear softens into something else. You move closer, voices low, words halting at first but soon warming into whispers too soft to carry beyond the leaves. The world outside insists you must not feel this, must not want this. But here, you do not speak of rules. You only breathe. The garden becomes alive with more than flowers. Every rustle of leaves feels like a curtain shifting, every brush of a hand more dangerous than a kiss. You sit together on the stone bench, hidden beneath the bough of an oak tree, the silence between you deeper than any conversation. It is not the touch itself that burns, it is the knowledge that it happens in defiance of everything. Victorian society preaches purity in parlours, prints sermons in pamphlets, enforces morality with laws and whispers. But gardens like this one exist everywhere in estates, behind vicarages, down forgotten alleys, patches of ground where repression cannot fully root out desire. Lovers carve their meetings into soil and stone, planting secrets that bloom in silence. When at last you rise to leave, the night feels heavier. You slip back through the ivy-covered gate, the creak of iron swallowed by fog. The streets beyond are quiet, lined with gas lamps, every window curtained tight. To them, you are still respectable, still untouched, still obedient. Only the garden knows otherwise. And as you walk away, the scent of roses clinging to your clothes, you realize the truth. Desire in Victorian England does not die. It simply grows where no one dares to look. The grate glows faintly, embers shifting beneath the last fragments of coal. You kneel close, skirts brushing against the hearthrug, the bundle of letters heavy in your hands. Their paper is soft from handling, edges smudged where your fingers lingered too long on certain phrases. Ink stains from another hand flourished loops, careful words, coded lines meant to conceal what they carried. You untie the ribbons slowly, the knot stiff with age, and spread the letters across your lap one final time. The house above you sleeps, the halls silent, the clock ticking in the corridor. Only here, in the quiet of night, can this act be done. Each letter is a fragment of forbidden life, moments of longing pressed into sentences, the rhythm of desire disguised in metaphor. The moon was bright tonight, one reads, a phrase that to anyone else would seem idle, but to you recalls a meeting, a touch, a silence held too long beneath trees. The garden is still, another whispers, and you remember not roses, but breath against your cheek. You feed the first page to the fire. The flame catches slowly, curling the edge, the ink bleeding blacker as the paper shrivels. The scent of burning paper rises, acrid and sharp, filling the room with a reminder that words, once written, are not easily erased. You watch until only a corner remains, glowing red, then collapsing into ash. The memory does not fade with it. It lingers, sharper now, as though destruction has carved it deeper into your mind. Another letter follows, then another. You hesitate over one, its edges worn thin from how many times you unfolded it, reread it, pressed it against your lips. The words still sing beneath your skin, but you know the danger of keeping them. A servant's careless discovery, a visitor's prying eyes, even your own weakness in rereading what should be forgotten, any of these could unravel you. So you hold it above the flame, trembling, and release. The fire swallows it with a hiss. Victorian society teaches that letters are proof of character, tokens of virtue when displayed, evidence of sin when found. A man's indiscretion may be forgiven. A woman's letter, once exposed, condemns her entirely. It is not the act that ruins her, but the record. And so countless women like you sit before hearths, burning away the traces of their own desire, watching their lives reduced to smoke. The bundle grows smaller. Ash thickens in the grate, sparks rising and dying before they reach the chimney. The room fills with heat, yet you feel colder, as though something vital is leaving you with each page. Still, you continue, because you must. By dawn, there can be no trace left. Only silence, only duty, only the face the world demands to see. When the last letter is gone, You stir the embers, watching until no flame remains. Only grey ash lies where once there were words, promises, and secrets. You brush your hands clean. Though the scent of smoke clings to your skin, you rise, straightening your skirts, and look once more at the grate. It holds nothing now, yet it feels fuller than before, for the truth is clear. Letters can burn, but desire cannot. It remains, heavy in your chest, alive in memory, glowing quietly like coal beneath ash. The parlour is dim, its curtains drawn tight, candles arranged in a circle upon the polished table. Their flames sway gently, bending as though stirred by unseen breath. You sit among the guests, your hands resting on the smooth wood, fingertips brushing against strangers on either side. The medium lowers her voice, instructing all to remain still, to open themselves to what lies beyond. To the world outside, this is a ritual of mourning, a desperate search for voices lost to death. But you feel another current winding beneath the silence, an intimacy hidden inside the séance itself. The guests bow their heads, some weeping softly, others whispering names of the departed. The medium hums, her chant low and rhythmic, and soon the air grows heavier. The table creaks faintly, shifting beneath your palms. A chill brushes the back of your neck, though no window is open. In the gloom, where sight is muted, every touch becomes magnified. The warmth of the stranger's hand against yours stirs something more than grief, more than faith. It stirs what Victorian restraint refuses to name. Spiritualism flourishes in these years because it cloaks longing in the guise of belief. To reach across the veil is acceptable when the dead are invoked. But in the half-light, where hands touch and voices tremble, it also creates cover for desires that cannot otherwise be spoken. A brush of fingers that lingers too long, a trembling sigh mistaken for sorrow, a body leaning closer beneath the excuse of seeking spirits. The medium's voice rises, calling to those unseen. Her words falter, then twist into moans, her breath quick, her face flushed in candlelight. The guests take it as possession, the spirit moving through her. You sense another truth. The séance is theatre, yes, but it is also release. In the dark, the barriers loosen. Women and men alike surrender themselves, whether to grief, to suggestion, or to forbidden want. The séance makes space for what daylight would condemn. A knock echoes from beneath the floorboards, sharp and hollow. Gasps fill the room, hands clutching tighter. The table shakes, a glass slides across its surface, spelling out letters too quickly to follow. The medium convulses, her hair tumbling free, her voice pitched high as though not her own. The others murmur prayers, tears shining in their eyes. Yet through the veil of performance you hear something else, the shiver of desire disguised as devotion. The candles gutter low, wax dripping onto the table. The séance reaches its close, the medium collapsing against her chair, her chest heaving with exhaustion. The guests pull away slowly, wiping their eyes, whispering about the miracle they have witnessed. But you sit a moment longer, your skin still alive where hands once pressed, your breath still unsteady from the silence. You leave the parlour with the others, stepping back into the fog-thick street. The night feels colder, harsher, yet the memory of the séance lingers. Victorian England may drape itself in mourning, may demand restraint and purity, but in the darkened rooms of spiritualists, desire finds its disguise. Under the cover of spirits and prayer, it lives, touches, and breathes, whispering through the candle smoke like the dead themselves. The staircase creaks beneath your step as you climb, the air of the house heavy with silence. In daylight, it looks like any other respectable home: lace curtains, polished banisters, hymnals on the table. But tonight the air is thick with tension, and the door you approach holds more weight than wood and brass. Behind it lies the story Victorian England feared most, a maiden fallen. You open it quietly and step inside. The room is dim, the single lamp casting a pale circle across the bed. On the coverlet sits a young woman, her hair unpinned, her eyes wide and hollow. She clasps her hands in her lap. fingers trembling as though still clutching something that has long since slipped away. Around her, the signs of respectability remain, her white gloves folded neatly on the dresser, her prayer book resting by the pillow. But they are only stage props now, for in the eyes of society she has crossed an invisible line, and nothing can bring her back. Her fall may have been a single night, a whispered promise in a garden, a stolen embrace in the shadow of a carriage, or perhaps it was not choice at all but force, power disguised as affection. The details matter little to the world outside. In Victorian England, once innocence is questioned, it is gone forever. She is marked, condemned, whispered about even before the truth is known. Her future, once filled with parlours and dances and the possibility of marriage, has narrowed to a single path of shame. She stares at the lamp, speaking softly, almost to herself. She recalls the moment she realized how the silence afterward was worse than the act, how the fear pressed in like a weight she could not carry. She speaks of glances that turned sharp, of neighbors who looked at her too long, of her own family whose voices grew clipped and cold. It is not the night itself that has undone her, it is the endless echo of judgment. On the mantel sits a letter, unopened. You recognize the handwriting, the man who once smiled in her direction, who swore devotion in careful, practiced words. He is gone now, vanished into another life, his reputation unmarked, his future intact. She, left behind, bears the ruin alone. The law does not call it crime, society calls it fate. A maiden's fall is always hers to carry, never his. You sit with her a while, the silence broken only by the ticking clock. Outside, the fog curls against the window, hiding the street from view. She lowers her face into her hands, shoulders trembling, and you feel the cruel imbalance of it all. Desire in this world is dangerous, but not equally so. Men emerge untarnished, women are undone. The lamp flickers low, casting long shadows across the room. Tomorrow, whispers will spread further. Tomorrow, she may be sent away to an asylum, to a distant relative, to anywhere her shame can be hidden. But tonight, within this small room, her story is painfully clear. Victorian England demands perfection, and when that perfection shatters, the fall is not only hers, it is the measure of a society built on silence and cruelty. The lamp dies at last, and the room sinks into darkness. Only her sobs remain, quiet as breath, marking the sound of a life reshaped by one forbidden night. The shop looks ordinary from the street. Its windows display stacks of novels bound in respectable leather, sermons on morality, histories of empire. But the true commerce lies deeper, past the counter where the bookseller greets patrons with a polite bow. You step carefully, heart quickening, as he gestures you toward a narrow passage behind the shelves. The air grows close, smelling of ink and damp paper, and the light dims as you descend into a back room where the real trade flourishes. Here, the walls are lined with volumes hidden from polite eyes, thin books printed cheaply, illustrations bound in flimsy covers, words written in a language too direct, too daring for the daylight world. This is the pornography of Victorian England, sold discreetly yet in great demand, its market thriving in the shadows of respectability. The bookseller moves confidently, handing you a small stack wrapped in brown paper, his voice a whisper. Payment is exchanged in silence, coins clinking softly before vanishing into a drawer. You peel back a corner of the wrapping, curiosity stronger than caution. Inside, the images strike you at once, sketches of bodies entangled, faces flushed with expressions never painted in respectable portraits. The words, though crude at times, are alive with urgency. They strip away every veil that society demands, speaking of pleasures never admitted in public. What shocks you most is not their existence but their familiarity. For beneath the scandal you recognize the same desires whispered in parlors, hidden behind curtains, burned in letters. Here, they are simply made visible. Outside, lawmakers thunder against such obscenities. Parliament debates new laws, moral crusaders cry out for purity, and newspapers warn of the nation's soul being corrupted. Yet even as they condemn, the trade grows. Holywell Street becomes infamous, its stalls bustling with men in hats pulled low, women slipping in under shawls, all seeking what cannot be found in the pages of sermons. The hypocrisy is striking. The louder the condemnation, the more vigorous the demand. You look up from the pages and notice the others in the room, faces half hidden in shadow, eyes darting nervously as they select their volumes. A clerk in a stiff collar, a gentleman with polished boots, a woman clutching her parcel as though it were medicine. Each one carries the same burden, desire denied in public, purchased in secret. The bookseller knows this. He thrives on it, his trade built not on sin but on silence. The sound of footsteps outside makes you flinch. The bookseller moves quickly, sweeping volumes beneath the counter, covering them with respectable tomes. For raids are common, inspectors eager to make examples, to seize the very books their superiors sometimes purchase in private. One knock too loud, one door opened at the wrong time, and reputations could crumble with the ash of confiscated paper. You slip the parcel beneath your coat and step back into the fog-drenched street. The air feels sharper, every glance heavier, as though all can see the weight you carry. But no one stops you. The city hums on, indifferent, its respectable face unbroken. And you know that somewhere, in countless other homes, the same brown-wrapped parcels lie hidden in drawers, beneath mattresses, behind locked doors. The pornographer's trade does more than sell books. It reveals the truth Victorian England tries hardest to deny. That beneath its sermons, its asylums, its veils and corsets, desire is alive, ravenous, and unashamed, waiting only for ink and paper to make itself known. Steam gathers thick in the air, clinging to your skin as you step onto the wet tiles. The door closes behind you with a dull thud, muffling the noise of the street outside. Within the bathhouse, the world softens. Lamps glow faintly through the haze, and every sound, footsteps, whispers, water splashing into basins, echoes strangely, as if carried from far away. You move slowly, careful not to slip, the scent of soap and damp stone heavy in every breath. To the Victorians, the public bathhouse is a place of health, a triumph of hygiene in a city struggling with filth and disease. Politicians praise them as civilizing institutions, and doctors write about their benefits for the working poor. But as you stand in the mist, your hands trailing against the warm tiles, you see what is less often spoken of. The bathhouse is also a place where the boundaries of propriety loosen, where desire mingles with the steam and lingers in every glance. Rows of benches line the walls, men draped in towels sitting shoulder to shoulder, their voices low and indistinct. Women's sections elsewhere echo with similar murmurs, the sounds of bodies moving, of laughter too quick to be innocent. The steam veils everything, blurring the outline of limbs, the curves of shoulders, the flicker of eyes that dart away when met. The bath is meant to cleanse, but in the haze, cleansing feels less like purity and more like intimacy. You lower yourself into the warm water, its heat seeping into your bones. Others drift nearby, some silent, some whispering, their voices soft enough to vanish into the hiss of steam. A hand brushes past yours beneath the surface, perhaps accidental, perhaps not. You hold still, pulse quickening, every nerve alive to the possibility of what lingers unseen in this fog. No one speaks directly of it, no one names it, but the atmosphere carries it nonetheless. Inspectors know this, of course. They warn of indecency, of inappropriate conduct in the shadows of the baths. Articles in the press rail against the dangers of immorality cloaked in steam. Yet the bathhouses continue to flourish, crowded each evening, their basins filled with more than water. Because for all its sermons, Victorian society creates its own contradictions. It demands restraint, yet provides spaces where restraint slips quietly away. You lean back against the tiles, the water lapping gently at your shoulders, the steam wrapping close like fabric. In the blurred outlines moving through the mist, you sense the truth. The bathhouse is not merely a public utility. It is a hidden theater of bodies, a place where desire breathes more freely, where anonymity shields what cannot be admitted in daylight. When you finally rise, droplets running down your skin, the air outside feels colder, harsher, the fog biting after the warmth within. You wrap yourself tightly in your coat, yet carry the bathhouse with you, the closeness, the glances, the weight of steam heavy with unspoken longing. For Victorian England may pretend the baths are about health and cleanliness, but behind every cloud of vapor lies another truth. Repression always finds cracks, and desire always seeps through. The parlor is quiet, the curtains drawn, the fire burning low. On the table before you lies a small box carved of dark wood, its lid inlaid with a delicate floral pattern. You lift it gently, the hinges creaking as though reluctant to reveal its contents. Inside rests a lock of hair, golden and bound with a silk ribbon. It gleams faintly in the lamplight, a fragment of life severed from its body, yet treasured as though it still breathed. Victorian England is obsessed with hair. It is plaited into bracelets, coiled into brooches, woven into wreaths displayed under glass domes. The lock of a lover, the curl of a deceased child, the braid of a wife, all are kept as tokens, talismans against loss. Hair endures long after flesh, a relic that refuses to decay, a reminder of intimacy in a world where intimacy must be hidden, and so it becomes both memorial and fetish, sacred and scandalous. You lift the curl from its box, the strands smooth against your fingers. Perhaps it was clipped in secret, stolen in the hush of night when the scissors whispered close to a beloved's head. Perhaps it was offered willingly, a gesture of devotion, folded into a letter or pressed into a palm. However it came to be here, it carries weight far greater than its size. To touch it is to bridge distance, to feel the presence of another body even in absence. In mourning, hair becomes relic. Women in black crepe pin brooches braided from the hair of their husbands, their fingers brushing it in moments of solitude. Mothers wear lockets filled with curls from children lost to fever, holding their memory close against the skin. Yet the same token, when given in passion rather than grief, carries another meaning. A lock exchanged in secrecy becomes a lover's pledge, a fragment of the body willingly surrendered, proof of desire made tangible. You recall the stories whispered about collectors, men who keep drawers full of hair, each tied with a different ribbon, each labeled with a name. Some acquire it from lovers, others purchase it in back alleys where nothing is too intimate to be sold. The fetish is spoken of with mockery in polite circles, yet beneath the laughter lies fascination. For hair, unlike words, cannot lie. It is a piece of the self, removed and yet still alive, carrying scent, texture, and memory. The curl slips between your fingers, and you feel the strangeness of it, soft yet unsettling, intimate yet detached. In this age of repression, where bodies are bound in corsets and hidden beneath layers of cloth, a single lock of hair becomes more powerful than a kiss. It is the one fragment of desire that can be kept, displayed, touched without scandal if disguised as mourning, if framed as memory. You place it back into its box, closing the lid with care. The fire hisses softly, a coal collapsing into ash. Outside, the fog presses thick against the windows, but here within, the fetish lingers. Hair, silent and enduring, carries both grief and hunger. It outlasts the body, it defies the rules. And in its quiet persistence, it reminds you that even the smallest fragment can hold the weight of forbidden desire. The courtroom is crowded, the air thick with murmurs and the shuffling of feet. You sit among the spectators, your gloves folded tightly in your lap, and feel the press of judgment heavier than the carved wooden walls. At the front, beneath the stern gaze of portraits and gas lamps burning too brightly, a woman stands accused. Her crime is not theft, not violence, but indecency, a word vague enough to mean anything, yet sharp enough to ruin her life. The judge adjusts his wig, his voice dry as parchment as he reads the charges. The words are clinical, wrapped in legal formality, but their meaning strikes deeper. A note discovered. A neighbor's testimony. A night spent where she should not have been. Nothing proven, yet everything assumed. In Victorian England, morality is law, and the courtroom becomes the theatre where desire itself is tried and sentenced. You watch her closely. She stands rigid, eyes lowered, hands clenched at her sides. Perhaps she once laughed too freely in a parlor. Perhaps she exchanged letters too bold. Perhaps she simply trusted someone who betrayed her. Whatever the truth, it no longer matters. The evidence has been transformed into symbol. She is not merely herself, but a warning to every other woman who might think of stepping beyond society's rigid boundaries. The prosecutor paints her as corrupt, dangerous to virtue, a contagion threatening the community. His words drip with moral outrage, yet beneath them runs another current: curiosity, even relish. The details of her so-called vice are described with a precision that reveals fascination disguised as disgust. The crowd shifts, torn between condemnation and morbid interest. Each listener pretends to judge, yet each leans closer to hear the scandal spelled out. When her voice is finally permitted, it trembles. She denies, she pleads, she insists upon her dignity, but the silence that follows is heavier than her words. The verdict has already been written, not in law but in expectation. Respectable men and women demand a sacrifice to prove that purity still governs their world. The judge nods solemnly, pronounces her guilty, and the gavel falls with a sound like iron striking stone. The punishment is not death, but it is ruin. Fines that will empty her purse. Public notice in the papers that will stain her name forever. Perhaps confinement in an asylum, or years in a workhouse where whispers will follow her like shadows. She will carry the mark of this trial long after the courtroom empties. As you leave, the crowd spills onto the fog-damp street, voices buzzing with gossip. Some tut about morality, others laugh too loudly, but none seem unsettled by the cruelty they have witnessed. For them, the trial was entertainment as much as justice. For her, it is the closing of every door. You walk on, your gloves damp with fog, and realize how many prisons Victorian society builds without iron bars. The courtroom, the parlor, the church all become cages, their locks forged not from steel but from morality itself. And within those cages, desire waits, restless, alive, guilty before it is ever spoken. The dressing table gleams in the soft light of the candle, its surface polished to a sheen, bottles of perfume arranged in perfect order, ivory brushes resting neatly in a row. To anyone else, it looks like the tidy station of a proper Victorian lady, everything in its place, everything decent and correct. But beneath, hidden behind the brass keyhole of the lowest drawer, lies a secret she prays no one will ever discover. Her fingers tremble as she unlocks it. The drawer slides open with the faintest sigh of wood, revealing objects no etiquette guide would dare to mention. A smooth cylinder carved of ivory, its surface worn from use. A small vial of oil hidden inside a velvet pouch. A book bound in brown paper, its pages filled with words too explicit to be read by lamplight without blushing. These are her companions in silence, her tools of relief, her hidden rebellion against a world that insists women feel nothing. For society tells her she is passionless by nature, that a lady's virtue lies in her restraint, that desire is a weakness she must never admit. Doctors write solemn treatises declaring that wives endure their husbands' visits out of duty, not pleasure. Preachers warn that indulgence is sin, that even longing within the mind must be scourged by prayer. Yet alone in her chamber, she knows the lie of it. Her body speaks truths the world refuses to hear, and so she has gathered these secret objects as answers. She runs her fingers along the ivory, cool at first, then warming beneath her touch. She thinks of the shops on Holywell Street where such items are whispered about, disguised as medical aids, purchased in brown paper wrappings by those bold enough to seek them. She thinks of the friend who once hinted, eyes lowered, voice barely audible, that such things exist, that they are not only for men, To own them is dangerous, to use them is to risk discovery. But the risk is less than the silence. In this drawer lies not only desire, but survival. A way to release the ache that builds in the quiet of the night, when duty feels like a cage and loneliness presses close. A way to feel alive in a world that insists she must be still, composed, unfeeling. Here, in the privacy of her room, she claims a piece of herself that no husband, no priest, no physician can touch. And yet, every time she closes the drawer, the fear returns. What if a maid stumbles upon it while dusting? What if a curious guest pulls it open? What if the objects, so carefully hidden, become evidence of shame too great to bear? She locks it quickly, slipping the key back onto her chain, and smooths her gown as though nothing has happened. The candle sputters, shadows dancing across the walls. Outside, the fog curls against the window, the city heavy with silence. She sits a moment longer, the weight of the secret drawer pressing against her mind, for in its depths lies the truth of Victorian desire, repressed, denied, hidden beneath polished wood. And though locked away, it is never extinguished. It waits, always in silence, to be touched again. The gaslights flare above the stage, casting golden beams across painted scenery and actors in powdered wigs. The audience laughs, applauds, fans fluttering like wings in the smoky air. From the polished boxes to the crowded pit, the theatre is alive with spectacle. But in the back row, beneath the shadow of the gallery, another performance takes place, one the stage was never meant to show. You sit pressed between strangers, the benches hard beneath you, the smell of sweat and smoke heavy in your nose. The play holds your eyes only half the time. The rest is drawn by what happens around you. In the back rows, propriety loosens. A woman's hand lingers on a man's arm, gloved fingers tracing patterns that are not part of polite conversation. Two young men sit too close, their knees brushing again and again, neither pulling away. A couple leans together, their whispers lost in the orchestra's rise, their lips nearly touching beneath the shadows. The Victorians praise the theatre as moral instruction, a stage where virtue triumphs and vice is punished. Newspapers publish long reviews about the lessons plays teach, the moral order reinforced through comedy or tragedy. Yet everyone knows the theatre is also a house of temptation. The dimness at the edges, the anonymity of the crowd, the cover of laughter and applause, all of it creates space for glances too long, touches too daring. It is no accident that moralists condemn the theatre as a breeding ground of vice. They are not entirely wrong. The actress on stage twirls, her skirts lifting just enough to reveal the curve of an ankle. The crowd gasps, half in delight, half in scandal, but in the back row such glimpses are expected, even craved. The stage provides excuse for desire, and the shadows provide shelter for its expression. You feel it in the press of bodies, in the quickened breath beside you, in the way every burst of applause seems to mask another secret. You shift slightly, the wood of the bench creaking, and catch the eye of someone across the aisle. Their gaze holds for a beat too long, filled with something neither polite nor safe. You look away, heart quickening, the air suddenly warmer despite the draft from the door. Around you, the audience laughs again, oblivious to the currents running beneath their own noise. When the curtain finally falls, the house erupts in applause, the actors bowing again and again. But in the shadows of the gallery, small dramas linger. A man slips his arm around a woman's waist, guiding her quickly toward the exit. Two men exchange a hurried glance before parting in opposite directions. A girl tucks her shawl tighter around her shoulders, hiding a flush that is not from the heat. You leave with the crowd, your footsteps joining the flood of boots down the stairs. Outside, the night air is cool, the fog pressing against the gas lamps, but your skin still burns faintly from the closeness of that shadowed room. Respectability may return with daylight, but tonight the theatre's back row has revealed another truth, that desire does not vanish in the dark. It finds cover there, and in the hush of applause it learns to breathe. The church bells toll across the foggy streets, their notes heavy, summoning the faithful from every alley and square. You join the slow-moving line pressing through the arched doors, the scent of damp wool and coal smoke following the congregation inside. The nave is vast, columns rising into shadow, candles flickering along the altar. To the eye, it is magnificent. To the heart, it is meant to be binding. You kneel upon the worn wooden bench, the prayer book open in your hands, its pages creased by countless fingers before yours. Around you, heads bow, lips murmur hymns, but the air feels less like devotion and more like surveillance. Religion in Victorian England does not merely comfort, it governs. Every sermon, every psalm, every prayer carries within it a command to restrain the body, to quiet the mind, to bury desire beneath layers of guilt. The preacher rises into the pulpit, his black robe sweeping as he turns his gaze upon the crowd. His voice rings out, echoing through stone, condemning vice with fire and certainty. He speaks of purity as though it were armor, of temptation as though it were a disease. His words sharpen when he speaks of women, the duty to remain untouched, the sin of straying, the damnation awaiting those who indulge in pleasures not sanctified by marriage. The congregation nods, whispers of amen rippling like waves, yet beneath their lowered eyes you sense something else. Fear, unease, the heavy silence of those who know themselves guilty simply for being human. Your own thoughts twist as you listen. The preacher's words paint desire as monstrous, but you feel its pulse even here, even now, beneath the vaulted ceiling. The hand you clasped earlier, the letter hidden in your drawer, the memory of a glance too long, they all burn within you, undeniable, alive. And as the preacher shouts of sin, you know he too is not untouched. There are stories, whispered in side streets, of ministers whose sermons thunder louder the more they hide. Religion, in this age, does not erase desire. It disguises it in rituals, cloaks it in hymns, and smothers it under incense. The choir rises, voices pure, soaring upward like wings. The music is meant to lift you, to cleanse you, to make you forget, yet you feel only the contradiction. The very notes meant to sanctify also stir something warmer, deeper. The sound brushes against your skin, reminding you of longing, of touch, of what the preacher insists you must bury. Desire seeps even into song, slipping through cracks where sermons cannot hold it. When the service ends, the congregation spills into the grey daylight, faces solemn, mouths repeating words of virtue, yet their eyes flicker, restless. You walk among them, the bells still ringing above, and feel the weight of religion pressing from every direction. The church claims your body, your thoughts, your soul, but inside, beneath the hymns and prayers, desire remains unconfessed, unbroken, alive. And you understand as the bells fade into silence. In Victorian England, the governing hand of religion was not merely faith, it was control. Yet no sermon, no pulpit, no hymn has ever been strong enough to silence the human heart. The courtroom is stifling, the air thick with perfume, sweat, and anticipation. Every bench is filled, reporters hunched over their pads, pencils scratching furiously. Outside, a crowd presses against the doors, eager to glimpse the man at the center of scandal. Oscar Wilde sits in the dock, his suit impeccable, his carnation pinned bright against his lapel. His posture is poised, his gaze steady, but beneath it all you sense the weight of the trap that has closed around him. The charge is gross indecency, a phrase vague enough to conceal but sharp enough to destroy. The whispers began with his friendship with Lord Alfred Douglas, the golden-haired poet who adored him. Then came the accusations, first murmured in private, then flung into the public square. Wilde had dared not only to desire but to write of desire, to lace it into plays and poems, to live it in ways society would not forgive. The prosecutor rises, his voice cutting through the silence. He reads aloud passages from Wilde's letters, their phrases lyrical, affectionate, tender. Words written in trust are now wielded as weapons. The courtroom titters, the crowd shifting, as if scandal is a kind of entertainment. Wilde responds with wit, his tongue as sharp as ever, quips flashing like daggers. For a moment, laughter ripples, even applause. But wit cannot shield him forever. The tide has turned. The more he defends himself, the more society condemns him. You watch him closely, the way his hands grip the edge of the dock, the flicker in his eyes when the accusations grow more lurid. The trial is not truly about law, it is about morality. It is about making an example of a man who dared to live too brightly, too honestly, in a world built upon shadows and silence. When the verdict comes, the gavel strikes like a hammer on stone. Guilty. Wilde is sentenced to 2 years of hard labor, his fortune stripped, his reputation shattered. He will be carted off to Reading Gaol, where silence and cold stone will gnaw away at the brilliance that once lit salons and stages. The crowd erupts, some jeering, some whispering, some silent with pity they dare not show. You leave the courtroom, the fog heavy outside, the newspapers already rushing to print his ruin, yet the truth lingers with you. Wilde is not guilty of corruption but of honesty. He gave words to desires others locked away in drawers, whispered only in parlors, hinted at in shadows. His trial is not just his own, it is the trial of every forbidden longing that Victorian England forces into silence. As the bells of street pools toll in the distance, you think of Wilde's words, his belief that life should be lived as art, beauty pursued even at cost. The prison walls will close around him, but his defiance will echo beyond them. For though the case has ruined a man, it has revealed what society most fears, that desire, once spoken, cannot be buried again. The house is hushed, the hour late. In the study downstairs, the surgeon sharpens his scalpel, steel ringing faintly as it meets stone. But here, in the bedchamber above, his wife lies awake, staring at the ceiling where the candlelight flickers across plaster roses. Her body is weary, but not from the day's work. It is weary from years of silence, years of being observed as specimen rather than cherished as soul. She remembers the first time he called her patient. It was said with a laugh, half a joke, yet the word lingered. Soon it became habit, her moods recorded in notes, her sighs interpreted as symptoms. A touch of melancholy, hysteria. A restless night, nervous weakness. Desire itself, when it stirred, was classified as disorder. He told her what she felt before she could speak it, his language of medicine replacing her own. And she, bound by vows and duty, learned to accept diagnosis in place of intimacy. The Victorians believed women delicate, fragile creatures, prone to imbalance. Doctors prescribed rest cures, tonics, even surgery to correct what they called excess passion. To live, as the wife of such a doctor, was to feel the double weight. Not only society's judgment, but the gaze of science at one's own hearth. She could not confess longing without inviting treatment, nor fatigue without inviting scrutiny. Every gesture became evidence, every silence a symptom. Tonight she lies still, her corset set aside, the faint red grooves etched into her skin like chains that linger even when removed. She turns her face to the pillow, listening to his footsteps on the stair. He enters, smelling of carbolic and smoke, his expression calm, clinical. He asks after her health as though he were visiting a ward, not a marriage bed. When he lays his hand upon her, it is steady, practiced, the touch of a man trained to examine, not to caress. She does not resist. Resistance would only confirm his suspicion that something is wrong with her. Instead, she closes her eyes and becomes silent beneath him, her body passive, her thoughts drifting to another life she cannot have. To be held without study, to be kissed without diagnosis, to be loved not as patient but as partner. When it is over, he rolls away, reaching for his notes. Even here, in the quiet of night, he writes, recording her sleep, her breath, her pulse. She turns toward the wall, tears gathering but never falling, because tears too would become symptoms to be cured. The candle gutters low, the roses on the ceiling vanishing into shadow. She closes her eyes, her heart aching with truths she cannot speak. In the silence of the room she understands the cruelest fate of all, to be seen always, yet never known. The surgeon's wife is not only bound by marriage but by medicine, and in that union her desire is not denied outright, it is dissected, catalogued, and left to wither beneath the surgeon's cold and steady hand. The boarding house is quiet now, though the day was full of clatterboots stomping on the stair, doors banging as lodgers came and went, the scrape of chairs across the dining hall floor. At night, the noise changes. It softens, but it never stops. You lie in your narrow bed, the mattress lumpy beneath you, the wool blanket scratchy against your skin. The walls are thin, so thin that every sound seems to seep through the plaster, filling your room as though it were your own. From the chamber to your left comes a steady rhythm, the turning of pages, the scratch of a pen. A clerk working late into the night, you imagine, his candle burning low, his breath sighing as he bends over ledgers. But then the sound shifts. The chair creaks, footsteps pace, and after a pause you hear it softer, more human, a sigh not of work but of something else. You hold your breath, listening, heat rising at the intimacy of a moment that is not yours. From the room above comes laughter, muffled but sharp, the kind that punctuates a whispered conversation. A woman's voice follows, quick, hushed, then swallowed by silence. The boards creak above your head, the rhythm unmistakable. You turn on your side, pulling the blanket higher, trying not to hear, but the bed itself seems to vibrate with their movement. Every creak of wood, every gasp muffled against fabric, becomes a confession made through the walls. The boarding house is a world of secrets stacked close together, strangers living inches apart, their private lives pressed thin by plaster. Respectability is paraded downstairs, where polite greetings and nods are exchanged. But at night, in the privacy of rooms barely separated, every forbidden longing escapes. You hear them all. The widow weeping softly into her pillow, the soldier murmuring prayers to no God you recognize, the maid sneaking in through the back door to join her lover. The building itself becomes alive with desire and despair, every room a chapter in a book no one dares to read aloud. You close your eyes, yet the sounds continue, wrapping around you until your own thoughts begin to stir. You imagine faces you have glimpsed in the dining hall, the girl who kept her gaze lowered, the man who laughed too easily, the couple who always left at different times but returned together. Each sound you hear at night becomes theirs, each whisper part of a story you are not supposed to know. The fire in your grate has long since gone out, leaving the room cool and damp. Still, your skin burns faintly, the air thick with secrets too close to ignore. You understand now why moralists warn against boarding houses, why sermons rail about their corruption. It is not the poverty of their rooms, nor the meals shared with strangers. It is the intimacy forced by thin walls, the way repression crumbles when voices travel through plaster. The clock in the hall strikes midnight, the sounds easing for a moment before returning in waves. You lie still in your bed, caught between unease and fascination, knowing that in this house no one is ever truly alone. Every longing is overheard, every secret is shared. And in the silence between the walls, forbidden desire breathes as surely as you do. The fog lies thick along Holywell Street, curling around the gas lamps and blurring the crooked row of shops. From a distance, the street looks no different than any other shutters, signboards, rows of books for sale. But step closer and you feel it, the pulse of something darker. Here, respectability thins. Here, vice is not whispered but sold. The vendors know their trade well. Their stalls are cluttered with novels bound in cheap leather, titles that suggest nothing to the casual eye, but promise everything to those who understand. Brown paper parcels are stacked behind counters, to be slid discreetly into the pockets of men with collars turned high. Printed sheets of caricatures and crude sketches hang just long enough for a glance before being snatched down at the approach of a constable. The market is alive with eyes darting, hands trembling, whispers exchanged in coded words. You walk slowly, boots crunching against grit, heart beating quicker. Every doorway seems to conceal something. A boy pushes past carrying a roll of prints under his arm, the corners peeking out, faces flushed, limbs entangled. A woman slips inside a shop, her shawl drawn low across her face, only to emerge moments later with a bundle tucked beneath her arm. Customers of every class move here. Clerks and laborers, officers in uniform, even gentlemen whose polished boots and rings betray their status. Vice does not discriminate, it only disguises. Above, the city thunders against such places. The newspapers cry that Holywell Street is a plague upon morality, a marketplace for ruin. Parliament passes laws, constables raid, judges thunder from the bench, yet for every seizure of books, for every cartload burned in the square, more appear. The demand is too great. Desire starves when it is hidden, but here it feeds, furtive yet unstoppable. You pause at a stall, its keeper an older man with quick eyes and a mouth set in a thin smile. Without a word, he slides a parcel toward you, wrapped in plain paper, tied with string. He knows why you are here. He does not ask, and you do not answer. Coins change hands, the sound sharp in the mist, and the parcel vanishes into your coat. The entire exchange lasts only seconds, yet it feels like crossing a threshold. Respectability is left behind on the main street. Here, you are marked by the silence of complicity. The fog thickens as you leave, swallowing the stalls, muffling the shuffle of boots and the mutter of voices. But the weight of the parcel remains, pressed against your side, warm from your own body heat. You know what it contains, pages filled with what society condemns, what morality pretends not to crave. You know, too, the risk if it is discovered, the ruin of reputation, the punishment of law. And yet you cannot leave it. For in this marketplace, beneath gaslight and fog, the truth of Victorian England stands clear. The louder society shouts for purity, the more it fuels the hunger for what is forbidden. Vice does not fade in silence. It thrives in shadow, sold openly on the very streets that condemn it. The doctor's waiting room is full. Women seated stiffly in rows of chairs, their gloved hands folded neatly in their laps. Their faces are pale, their eyes weary, each one carrying the same invisible burden. They do not speak to one another, for their complaints are not to be shared. Instead, they wait in silence, the air heavy with the faint scent of antiseptic and damp wool. On the desk in the adjoining office lies a ledger, thick with names, all written beneath the same diagnosis: hysteria. In Victorian England, hysteria becomes the illness of women, a catch-all for every restlessness, every longing, every sadness that society refuses to understand. Doctors describe it in endless pamphlets: a wandering womb, a nervous disorder, a sickness of the imagination. Symptoms are listed in dizzying variety: sleeplessness, fainting, irritability, melancholy, even laughter deemed too loud or tears shed too freely. In truth, it is not a disease, but a sentence, a way to turn desire into illness and discipline into cure. You sit at last in the doctor's chamber, the door clicking shut behind you. He asks questions not about your life, but about your nerves, your appetite, your moods. You tell him of your sleepless nights, of the weight in your chest that will not lift, of the restlessness that burns when the house falls silent. He nods, writing briskly, never lifting his eyes. His conclusion is already decided. You are hysterical. The treatment varies from physician to physician, but the message is the same. Your body is the problem, not your life. Some prescribe laudanum, its bitter dose meant to lull you into submission. Others order long rest cures, shutting women away in dim rooms, forbidding reading, writing, even conversation. The most intrusive use their hands or their curious devices, disguising pleasure as medical relief, insisting that the body must be calmed through mechanical means. Each method cloaks itself in the language of science, but each reduces you to silence. You think of the countless women across the city, confined in their bedrooms, their shutters closed, their journals confiscated, their protests dismissed as further proof of their condition. You picture asylums filling with those who refuse to be quiet, their voices labeled madness, their desires locked behind iron bars. The epidemic is not one of illness but of repression, a sickness of society that demands women feel nothing, want nothing, live only as vessels of obedience. The doctor folds his notes, hands you a prescription, and dismisses you with a smile practiced so often it feels like a mask. You rise, skirts brushing the floor, and leave the room colder than when you entered. Outside, the fog clings thick to the street, muffling the sound of wheels and hooves. You clutch the slip of paper, its words no cure at all, but you know you will take it, because refusal is not permitted. And yet, beneath your gloves, your fingers tremble with something that cannot be dulled by powders or cut by scalpels. Beneath the weight of the diagnosis, desire still pulses, alive, stubborn, undefeated. The true epidemic is not hysteria, it is longing forced into silence, multiplying in every parlour, every bedchamber, every locked heart of Victorian England. The mirror gleams in the morning light, its glass flawless, its silver frame polished by careful hands. You stand before it as the maid fastens the final button of your gown, the stiff bodice closing around you like armor. The fabric is heavy, layers upon layers, skirts falling in perfect folds to the floor. Gloves slip over your fingers, smoothing every curve, every trace of flesh. A bonnet waits by the door, its ribbons freshly pressed. By the time you leave the house, not a single detail will be out of place. This is what Victorian society demands the mask of respectability. To the world, you will appear virtuous, modest, untouchable. Each garment, each gesture, each polite smile is another piece of the disguise. The neighbors will see only propriety when you pass. The shopkeepers will greet you with bows, believing in your dignity. At church, eyes will glance approvingly at your composure. They will never know the truth that stirs beneath the satin and lace. For the mask is not only clothing, it is silence when words ache to be spoken, composure when desire burns beneath the skin. It is laughter at the proper moment, never too loud, never too free. It is lowering your eyes when glances grow too bold, even when your body longs to return them. The mask shields you, protects you, but it also smothers you. At a gathering that evening, you see it worn by others, just as carefully arranged. The hostess greets her guests with warmth, but her hands tremble faintly as she pours the wine. A gentleman speaks of politics with a voice steady as oak, though his gaze drifts too often toward the door where a certain figure lingers. Two young women laugh softly in a corner, their words innocent to every ear but their own. Everyone wears the mask, and everyone knows it, yet no one dares remove it. The parlor fills with chatter, the air thick with perfume and candle smoke. Conversation flows like a river, yet beneath its surface runs another current. Every touch is measured, every glance calculated, but each holds more meaning than the words themselves. Respectability is a stage, and the actors perform tirelessly, night after night. To falter is to fall. To let slip even a corner of the mask is to risk ruin. Later, when you return home, you remove the gown piece by piece, each layer heavier to shed than the last. At last, you stand before the mirror again, your hair loosened, your face bare of society's demands. For a fleeting moment, you see yourself not as the world requires, but as you are tired, restless, alive. The mask lies folded on the chair, ready to be donned again at dawn. You slip beneath the covers, the city quiet beyond your window, and realize the cruel truth. Respectability is the greatest disguise of all. It allows desire to exist only in silence, never in speech. It hides longing behind polished manners, locking it away until even you begin to believe the mask is real. Yet in the darkness, with no one to watch, you feel the fire stir again, untamed, waiting for the chance to breathe. The knock comes suddenly, sharp against the wood, echoing through the hallway like a gunshot. You freeze where you sit, the half-written letter slipping from your hand. For a moment the house is silent, Every sound suspended: the crackle of the fire, the ticking of the clock, even your own breath. Then the knock comes again, louder this time, insistent. Your pulse hammers in your throat. Someone is at the door, and you are not ready to be seen. In Victorian England, discovery is the true terror, not the act itself, but the moment when secrecy crumbles and the gaze of others rushes in. A whispered rumor is enough to unravel a life. A maid finding a hidden drawer, a visitor glimpsing a forbidden book, a letter dropped and left too long upon the table. Respectability is a mask, and discovery tears it away in an instant. You move quickly, snatching the letter from the floor, stuffing it into the folds of your gown. Your hands shake as you smooth the paper against your skin. Another knock this time, followed by footsteps on the stone steps outside, the scrape of a boot, a faint murmur of voices. Whoever it is, they are not alone. Your mind races through possibilities. A neighbor, a constable, a family member come unannounced? Each possibility carries its own ruin. The memory of others discovered flashes before you. The widow whose letters were found and read aloud in court, her words twisted into evidence of sin. The young man caught leaving a club at the wrong hour, dragged into a trial that stripped him of his livelihood. The girl dismissed from service when a ribbon, not her own, was discovered beneath her pillow. The punishment is not always prison, not always the law. Sometimes it is worse: exile, shame, whispers that cling for life. The knocks cease, replaced by silence. You dare not breathe, straining to hear. A shadow moves past the curtained window, the faint outline of a figure blurred by gaslight. They wait, listening as you listen. In that pause you feel the weight of every secret pressing against the walls of the room. The book in the drawer, the ribbon hidden beneath the lining of your trunk, the memory of a touch you should not recall so vividly. Each one could be a noose if discovered. At last the footsteps fade. The street grows quiet again, only the fog pressing at the glass, only the lamps glowing faintly beyond. You sink into the chair, your body trembling, your breath shallow as though you have run miles. The house is unchanged, yet it feels different, heavier, more dangerous. For though you have escaped, you know how thin the barrier is. One more knock, one careless moment, and the mask will slip for good. The fire pops in the grate, sending sparks against the iron screen. You lean forward, pressing your hands against your knees, willing your body to calm. Outside, the fog curls through the street, indifferent to your fear. Inside, the panic of discovery lingers, sharp and relentless. You know the truth now. The greatest danger is not desire itself, but the sound of footsteps on the stair, a hand at the door, and the knowledge that secrecy cannot last forever. The night is still, the fog curled thick around the rooftops, muffling every sound until the city itself feels held in breath. You sit once more before the fire, its embers faint, their glow barely enough to reach the corners of the room. The curtains are drawn, the doors locked, the house silent. Yet you feel the presence of everything that has passed: the letters burned, the whispers in the parlor, the glances caught in lamplight, the hush of a garden gate closing behind you. Each fragment lives still, woven together into something larger. For in Victorian England, desire does not die. It is hidden, disguised, punished, but never extinguished. It lingers in the scent of a ribbon tucked inside a drawer, in the memory of a touch stolen on a foggy street, in the faint tremor of hands pressed together beneath a séance table. Respectability may clothe the body, religion may silence the tongue, medicine may try to cut or cure, but none can erase the hunger that persists beneath. You lean back, closing your eyes, and the silence fills with echoes. You hear the faint laughter from the back row of the theatre, the splash of water in the bathhouse, the knock at the door that froze your heart. You see the black veil lowered across a widow's face, the flicker of an ankle in gaslight, the glimmer of Wilde's defiant gaze in a courtroom thick with judgment. Each moment is both fleeting and eternal, a secret carried in the dark, yet impossible to destroy. The Victorians believed themselves masters of morality, builders of walls so strong that temptation could never breach them. But the walls themselves became riddled with cracks. Every corset's grip only sharpened longing. Every sermon thundered against sin only magnified its allure. Every trial meant to humiliate only revealed what society itself could not resist. The era that claimed to repress desire ended by obsessing over it, binding it tighter, yet making it more powerful by the very act of denial. The fire flickers lower, ash settling softly. You rise, crossing the room to the locked drawer, your hand pausing upon its brass handle. Within lies the evidence of your own secrets, small tokens, objects ordinary to anyone else, but alive to you with memory and meaning. You do not open it tonight. You do not need to. The knowledge of what lies inside is enough. The drawer is not only a hiding place, but a reminder that desire has survived every attempt to silence it. Outside, the bells toll midnight, their sound carried faintly through fog. The city sleeps in the guise of purity, every curtain drawn, every face arranged in composure. Yet behind those curtains, in countless houses like this one, secrets endure. They live in silence, in hidden rooms, in trembling hands and quiet hearts. They will outlast sermons, laws, and punishments. For repression cannot kill what is most human. And as the embers die at last, you understand the truth that hums beneath every story, every scandal, every shadowed act. Forbidden desire is never destroyed. It endures, always, quietly alive in the dark.